Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Merritt Regular Council meeting, Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkatma and the Syilx people. No late items, I don't see. Public input. Do we have any public input? Thank you very much. Adoption of minutes, 4.1, regular council meetings, minutes, June 27th, 2023. Recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting be held on June 27th, that were held on June 27th, 2023 be adopted. Councillor Egan, Councillor Etchart, any errors or omissions? Does everybody look at Wendy? Don't see any. All those in favor? Manuel, go ahead, please. It was in there. Maybe in the revised, because it was in the earlier ones. No, it's there. 6.2. Should present to council in the Merritt District Chamber of Commerce for the funding of $11,000 to balance out. 6.2, is that the one you're talking about, Councillor Ogan? Okay. I don't see it in the minutes. So, can you push your button there, temporary CAO Lawis?
So, Your Worship, just to say that, yeah, we will of course be arranging that meeting. It has not yet been organised at this point, but there is the note in that minute that the Chamber requested Council meet with the Chamber, so we would certainly be looking into that. And I think there's a Economic Development Committee of the Whole meeting, which has also been scheduled, at which would be a good opportunity to say if the City's Economic Development Manager and Council want to do any further work, research, information, etc., with the Chamber of Commerce on any matters.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Ogan? You got all that? So again, I'll read that again. So that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on June 27, 2023 adopted as amended on the amendment. Those in favor? Opposed? Now on the actual minutes, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Ogan. General matters, delegations and recognitions BC 5.1, Recycle BC. I do believe that is on the, oh, here we go. Thank you, ma'am. I'll just get you come up and push that red button and introduce yourselves, please. And when it goes red, there we go. And you were live. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, councillors, for inviting us to talk a little bit about our program and contamination remediation. I will introduce myself. It's good. I can actually read it. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to see that part. So how do I progress the slides?
Yeah.
Next, please.
Could I just get you to introduce yourselves, please?
Oh, yes. It's actually on the slides.
Okay,
I will just next slide.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. My name is Ann Danilevich, and I'm the manager of stakeholder relations in Western Canada.
And I'm Carmen Fennell. I'm the manager of collections for the interior and the north.
Thank you.
So Recycle BC is a not-for-profit organization responsible for residential packaging and paper products recycling in BC. We call that PPP. So if you hear us say PPP, that's what we're talking about. We were launched in 2014, and we ensure household materials are collected, sorted, and responsibly recycled and recovered. Our program is funded by over 1,169 businesses, including retailers, manufacturers, restaurants. So all those businesses that supply packaging and paper products to residents of BC. Next slide, please. So the Province of British Columbia Environmental Management Act and the Recycling Regulation is kind of the framework under which Recycle BC operates, including all the amendments that went into effect since the program launched. And we operate under a stewardship plan that's approved by the Ministry of Environment. Our current plan was approved by the BC government in 2019. We currently have a draft plan onto the ministry. It hasn't been approved yet, but so we're waiting for the subsequent version approval. So I'm not going to go too much detail on this slide. This is from our annual report, which was published in July of this year. So if you want to know more about our program performance, I encourage you to go to recyclebc.ca and have a look at our annual report. But one number I wanted to draw your attention to is that 95.4%, and that is the amount of materials that were sent for recycling. So it's like the highest amount yet. And our programs is a really big achievement for us. And more program highlights from 2022. So we have 11 additional communities that joined our program with 28 regional districts. And of course, our program is accessible to 99.3% of British Columbia. Next slide. And that is that 99.3%. That's in 3 streams of collection. So curbside, multifamily collection, as well as depot collection. And we have over 2 million households that are serviced in either curbside, multifamily, or depots, and 194 communities participate in our program. Now, when we look at post-collection, I'm going to have to look here because that type is a bit too small for me. But post-collection includes receiving material after collection, transport of material to material recovery facilities, we call them MRFs, sorting material into specific grades and types of material, then they become commodities, so they're baled, and then marketing of these materials as commodities to end markets. And this post-collection network is made up of a variety of subcontractors that are engaged by our one post-collection partner, GFL. And this province-wide network system creates economies of scale, allowing centralized investments into recycling technologies and infrastructure benefits for the whole network. And that consolidated volume also allows us to have better access to end markets. Now, in terms of end markets, knowing where materials go, where after leaving our facilities, and that's to be processed responsibly and ultimately back into the market, matters to us. We approve and verify each of our end markets, including visits to facilities to ensure that materials are being managed responsibly. Materials collected at the curb and deeps are sold and processed as follows. So actually 98% of Recycle BC's plastics are processed right here in BC, the facility in the Lower Mainland, where they're turned into pellets, and that's the image that you see over here, and they're recycled to new packaging and products, including nursery pots, pipes, cosmetic containers, variety of other plastic packaging. The 2% of plastics that are not processed in BC, that's the expanded polystyrene or styrofoam, and it's collected, segregated, it's clean, it's densified, and then it's sold to markets in the Pacific Northwest and Asia, where it's turned to picture frames and crown molding. And they're too soon. Okay, glass is shipped to Abbotsford or Quesnel, and metal containers are sold to end markets in BC, Ontario, and the US, and it's made into new packaging, aluminum cans. And paper is collected and sold to end markets either in BC, the States, or overseas, and can be made into new things like egg cartons, boxes. And the majority do remain in the Pacific Northwest. So in 2022, 60% of paper products remained in a domestic market, so Pacific Northwest, so as 40% were sent overseas. Next. This year we really wanted to focus on plastics. If you do get a chance to go look at our annual report, we have a special 2-pager there on plastics where you can find out all the initiatives that we've been undertaking since the program started to really move plastics up in that pollution prevention hierarchy and get to that 98% material staying in BC, as well as that higher recycling rate. What I would like to draw your attention on is that 48%. So in 2022, residents set out for collection and returned to a deposit 48% of total plastics that was supplied to market by producers of packaging and paper. And now that's both flexible plastics and solid plastics, right? So the For flexible plastics, the number is a little lower. It's about a 28%, I believe, and it's right in the 60% range for other plastic containers. So that 48% is an average of the two. And of course, that is actually a very good number when you look at other jurisdictions and other provinces, but we want to continually improve on that number and, get as close to 100 as we can. And that's where we need your help. Next. So when we look at our environmental performance, we have two facilities that do our kind of our sorting and they're both in the Lower Mainland, and there's new technology facilities and processing capacity. So that allows us to sort better. It creates higher quality material bales for commodities, which gives us access to better markets and materials and more North American and markets as well as the stringent international markets. It also reduces our reliance on overseas markets, and we support local circular economy. So if you look at where we started in the program launch in 2014 to where we are now, so 2022, because it's from our 2022 annual report. So in 2014, only 33% of our materials were processed domestically, and so the majority was exported. And if you look now, it's the inverse, and even more, 75% is processed domestically, and 25% is exported. And a lot of that is because of the quality of our material. So, we work with our collectors and our post-collection to make sure that our material is very clean. We have a standardized material list, of course, for the whole province. We really focus on reducing that contamination, having that higher quality material, which then gives us access to more markets, and it's very sought out. They want to buy our materials because they're so clean. And that, I will now hand it over to Carmen to talk about contamination.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, I'm here to tell you about what we consider contamination in our program. So contamination, we kind of break it down into a couple different categories. So there's incompatible material. So that's the material that shouldn't be in your curbside collection at all. So that's your not accepted materials, which is things like your tennis shoes. Unsortable material, which is material that might be tied, say, in a plastic bag, so it then makes it so it can't be taken apart on the sort line. Or contaminated PPP, which might be a hairspray container that has contents left in it. Or hazardous products, which are batteries, sharps, propane canisters, that kind of thing. We also see missorted materials in our curbside programs, and those are items that are accepted by Recycle BC, but only at depot locations. So those are things like the flexible plastics, so your plastic bags, your chip bags, glass containers, as well as your foam products, so styrofoam. All of those are accepted, but not in your curbside programs. So when we are referring to not accepted material, when we're actually auditing your program material, we're looking at the not accepted. We don't consider the missorted material as, not part of the calculation when we're giving you your contamination rate. So as Anne said, reducing contamination is super important to us because it makes sure that our commodities are really clean and we're able to sell that material, and it's desirable because we can keep it as clean as possible because of our strict requirements. Clean material is also important because it can significantly impact the health and safety of our collection and post-collection staff. It can potentially damage facilities and machinery, and just yesterday or the day before, we had another facility fire. Recently, we had a major one in Kamloops, and we've just had another one yesterday. So batteries, propane canisters in our recycling collection is really, really hazardous for, right from the street level to our post-collection facilities. The acceptable contamination rate for all collector contracts throughout the province is 3%. So that means we want to see a 3% or less not accepted material rate in your program material. The failure to reduce that contamination rate could result in what we call a service level failure credit. So City of Merritt is compensated for the amount of material that you collect per household. And so a service level failure credit would simply mean the withholding of those funds if we deem that contamination too high. So we have an audit facility, the Center for Material Intelligence in the Lower Mainland, and over 1,600 samples are sent to the CMI annually. Samples are taken either from a random selection, so it's like a bingo machine, so if your ball comes out, your community gets audited. We do have the ability to also select 8 discretionary audits per month, so if there's communities that want to have more information and they haven't come out of the bingo machine, we can request that through our audit facility. The audit categories then give us feedback as well as the community about what kind of material we're seeing in the collection, and that also is helpful to provide that information to residents. Audits are, individual audit scorecards are provided for each audit that we get for the community, and then if there's more than 3 audits per community in a quarter, then that generates a formal scorecard which is sent to the different collectors. So the City of Merritt currently has a contamination rate of 8.4% of not accepted material, and that's calculated from May of 2021 until current. So the last audit that we have seen from Merritt, and I just saw that a couple days ago, was 3%, which is really great because that's the target we want to see. The last audit we had for Merritt was a contamination rate of 18.1%, so that's significantly higher than the allowable percentage. And that's not meeting City of Merritt's contamination targets. So when the contamination rates for collectors are consistently above that 3% threshold, we try to engage with our collectors. So we've been working with the City of Merritt since 2021 to work on a contamination remediation strategy. And we've asked Merritt to provide a plan to us. So this plan should include some detailed education and promotion strategies to help proactively communicate the collection program changes, any kind of requirements and enforcement strategies to residents. Any plan to seriously address this kind of contamination should include some of the following elements. So obviously promotion and education is important. We need monitoring of that material, training of the collection staff as well as office staff, enforcement actions, as well as tracking the different types of activities that Merritt is doing. So on the promotion and education side of things, that could be recycling calendars, it could be OOPS tags that you leave on a resident's curbside cart if there's contamination in it. It could be social media campaigns. It can be different educational material that's left with collection containers, such as brochures. The monitoring aspect is maybe doing curbside audits, having summer students do ride-alongs, or having bin inspections to actually see what residents are putting out at the curbside. The training is obviously for your collection staff, both the drivers as well as your office staff, to be able to answer questions from residents. The enforcement side of it is maybe leaving behind that contamination in the carts, leaving full carts behind, contamination that's identified and recorded by drivers to then be brought to the office, so that maybe follow-up letters could be sent or postcards sent to those residences. It could be changes in bylaws to allow the administration of fines for residents that are repeat offenders, and it could be implementing some onboard technology so that there's cameras that when they see and identify contamination, it automatically triggers a letter to be sent with a photo to that resident. We also the tracking aspect is to keep track of how many bins you've checked, see how many residents have more than, a certain number of offenses, calculate how many OOPS tickers you've sent out, that brochure aspect, have you left any brochures at residents? So just knowing how much of that field work has been conducted. So the City of Merritt Contamination Remediation Plan for 2023 has some promotional and education aspects to it. So far in 2023, there's been 10 seasonal reminders on social media, including quite a few reminders about keeping glass out of your curbside recycling carts. And there's brochures that have been left at residences for 3 weeks that is scheduled in the program plan for 2023. So the curbside inspections that are happening have been scheduled for the end of March, end of June, and end of October. So there's a week at the end of each month for inspections to actually happen on the ground. Training is part of that program plan, so ensuring the crews and the frontline staff are informed about new program changes. And then the enforcement aspect is to leave behind OOP stickers when there's contamination noted in the bins. And that, again, is happening for those 3 weeks at the end of March, June, and October. So as per the contamination remediation plan that was submitted by Merritt, the request that we've made is not to reduce to 3%. We've asked that Merritt's reduction be 25% from the rate of when we asked for that plan. So when we asked for the plan, starting in February of 2023, the rate of contamination for the City of Merritt was 7.5%, and so 25% reduction from that is asking for a 5.6% contamination rate. So the current rate for Merritt is 8.4% as of yesterday. So that's meaning that the contamination rate for Merritt has actually gone up from when we originally asked for a contamination remediation strategy. And as I mentioned, not meeting those targets could result in service level failure credits being applied.
We do have additional resources that you can use in education and promotion, including lots of templates, especially for things like social media. So as Karin mentioned, there's been 10 social media posts, reminders that Merritt has sent out, and a lot of those have been about glass. But as you saw in some of those other images, some of the things that are deposited as contaminant, there's a soccer ball, there's clothing, there is, kids' toys, things like that. So we do have resources that you don't have to, start from scratch, that your staff can use and potentially in your social media campaigns, and that's on the collector portal. So recyclebc.ca/collector resource. So your staff should have access to that. And of course, if they can't find something, they can contact Carmen, the field service specialist, and she will be able to find the correct templates if they're not able to find them. We also do province-wide campaigns that, of course, such as Careless Recycling Can Kill. So that's our hazardous waste reduction campaign. It's running now. We started early this year because, as Carmen mentioned, we've had a lot of facility fires, and unfortunately that trend has not been slowing down with a fire at one of our facilities just in the last couple of days. We do other ones like Pack Clean, Leave Clean that's currently running. So, when you're going out camping or fishing, whatever you bring in with you to where you're going, we want you to take that back and maybe drop it at a depot on your way home. So that's kind of the focus of that campaign. So there's a variety of campaigns that we run, as well as, of course, signage that we sent to depots and brochures that we provide.
So the next steps for the contamination remediation plan is I will conduct 3-month check-ins with City of Merritt staff, and we're currently in the process of doing our second check-in. So that will be August, and then we have the plan scheduled to conclude in November. So that's when we will determine whether or not the city has reduced the contamination enough to either continue with another plan for the following year to work on the success that Merritt's had, or we would investigate the option of maybe issuing service level failure credits if there isn't a significant improvement. So that's where we're at right now, is to do the 6-month check-in to prepare us for the next steps for the conclusion of our plan.
And of course, by reducing the amount of material that does not belong in curbside and multifamily recycling streams, collectors can ensure more PPP is effectively recycled. So we really want to work together to ensure the material is clean and it continues to be desirable by our end markets, ensuring that more material gets recycled and is kept off the city streets, out of our landfills, our waterways, and our environment. So we really want to work with you to make sure to keep all that those items out of the environment and recycled. Thank you. And if there's any questions, please ask away.
Councillor Charney.
Plastics always confuse me. I don't know. I don't throw plastic in because I've been told we can't. In Merritt, we can't put in plastics. What plastics can we put in our recycling bin? Like a yogurt container. Can I put that in?
Yogurt container? Absolutely. So one way I like to explain it is, first of all, is it a package or is it a product? So our recycling program is for packaging. So for example, you have, you're buying, like a salad in a store, right? And it comes in a plastic kind of box container. So that can go in. Laundry detergent, for example, once it's empty, it's in a plastic jug, that can go in. Your cream, for example, face cream, once it's done, if it's plastic, it can go in. If it's glass, then it goes separated, right? So it's, and we ask that the lids be removed. So for example, it's a pickle jar, the lid would go into your curbside bin, right, the blue bin, and the glass would go in the gray bin or in to a depot. And same with flexible plastics, like plastic bags or chip bags, crinkly things. Even squishy foam, we call it. So it's not like styrofoam, it bends. So styrofoam will break, but the squishy foam, as we call it, it'll bend. So that can all go together in one bag, all your flexible plastics. So like I said, plastic shopping bags, crinkly things. Again, if the salad example, if you buy like a spinach salad and it's in a bag, so that bag can go in there. At the depot, yeah. I was just about to get that. So that goes to the depot. That can't go in your blue bin. Yeah. So flexible plastics go to the depot, so does styrofoam. But any kind of hard container, that goes in your bin. And the reason for that is the flexible plastic, if it's all together mixed in the bin, it can get tangled into the machinery sometimes because we use really high-end sorting technology. It's so light, it can mistake it as paper, and then it goes into the paper commodity. So if it's collected separately at the depot, then we're able to make sure it's sent to recycling.
Can you give me an example of a flexible plastic?
A plastic bag.
Oh, plastic. Okay.
Yeah, a plastic bag, yeah. Or from chips, candy wrapper.
Okay. Sorry, that answered my question.
Perfect.
Councillor Etchart.
So in Merritt, when you refer to the depot, would that be the one on Clapperton where people take their bottle return? Is it that depot, or do they have to go to the landfill in Lower Nicola?
So the bottle depot in town is just collecting glass. It's what we call a satellite depot for the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. So the actual full Recycle BC depot is at the Lower Nicola receiving facility, yeah.
And do you have some materials that we could maybe take and drop off with the schools? Because I remember being in school when recycling was getting to be more popular. And I think if you teach the school kids that, they'll probably bring it home. And I was thinking that might be an idea. I don't know.
Yeah, so that is something that has been discussed with the operations team with the City of Merritt. Yeah. And a lot of those in-class engagements are done in collaboration with the regional districts. So Thompson-Nicola Regional District does have education programs that they can do in schools. So I would encourage the staff to reach out to the TNRD and see if there could be some collaboration with getting into the schools.
And are there particular items that you're seeing more of, like soiled pizza boxes or something in particular, or just overall contamination?
It tends to be overall contamination. So, like for Merritt example, we're seeing a lot of glass, we're seeing a lot of flexible plastics, and we're seeing what we call durable plastics. So they're hard plastics, but they're not a package. So like your coffee machine is plastic, but it's not a package. So therefore, that's not accepted in the curbside carts.
But could go to the depot? Or that would be more...
That's a different program.
Okay.
They do probably have a small appliance program there, but our program is strictly for packaging and paper.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Petrosi.
Anyway, I'm going to be going home tonight to getting garbage picked up tomorrow, so I'll be checking my containers tonight. So thanks for coming. Do you have a rating of how we compare to other communities, say our size?
Yeah, there was a slide in there, and I was just talking so fast because I didn't want to run out of time. But it does have a comparison. If you can go back, I'll tell you where to stop. That one. So the green line on that slide is the target rate of 3% that we ask communities to reach. The gray line is the program average, which is comparing your type of collection, which is automated cart or a cart program, and single stream, which is you put your paper materials and your container materials in one bin, as opposed to having separate bins, one for containers and one for paper. So we're comparing apples to apples. Your program, single stream carts, the average for that is that gray line, and you can see there's some significant spikes for the city of Merritt that's higher than the provincial program average for that type of container collection type.
Okay. Yeah, I just think educating the public a little bit more. I know there's commercials, there's ads, things like that, but maybe educating the public a little bit more might be something. But I guess we'll
Your job, I guess.
try to work with the community. So thank you.
Councillor Egan.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions regarding packaging as well. I've always had a concern about, the 2-liter jug or carton of milk, because it's got a film on the outside or a waxy. Can you put that in?
So milk is now actually part of the Encore Return It. So you can, if you take it to the bottle depot, you will get your 10 cents back. So it's actually not part of our program. That said, if it does end up in our bin, it's not the end of the world. It will get recycled, but it should be taken to Encore Return It.
Okay, and then also about if you have animal food packaging, it's paper, but it also has kind of a glossy, shiny finish on it as well.
Yeah, so it's part of flexible plastic, so that's okay. That could still go into the flexible plastics that go to the depot.
Okay, and then the other big thing, my son used to work for a pizza shop,
Mm-hmm.
and he swore to me that those pizza boxes were not recyclable.
They are if they're not too heavily stained. So if there's like a little bit of grease stain, that's okay. That can go in. If there's like lots of cheese stuck to it and it's,
It has
then
nothing to do with the paper then. It's only if it was contaminated.
yeah, it's only if it was quite contaminated. Like if it's full of cheese, that's obviously not great. And then it kind of depends. Some municipalities you're able to put that in your compost. So I'm not sure what City of Merritt is doing, but yeah, if it's only a little bit, you can put it in.
And you also say that you recycle styrofoam.
Yes, at the depot.
At the depot.
Yeah.
Because I know for my business, we have waste management pickup, and we're not allowed to put in styrofoam. They won't take it.
Yeah, so that's if it's a business, it's a commercial arrangement. So it's institutional, commercial, industrial, which is not part of our program. So different haulers might have different requirements. It's a harder to recycle material. We are mandated by the recycling regulation by the ministry to recycle this material. So we do have markets for it, but we do need to collect it separately because, as you know, like styrofoam, you break it, it goes everywhere, and it kind of contaminates other materials. So that's why we can't collect it in a blue bin, but we do collect it at the depot.
There's also all those little mini pieces of styrofoam that people use for packaging now too, that just go everywhere.
That's right.
But I appreciate you coming, and I think that probably the community at large needs to know about the styrofoam too, because ultimately it just gets thrown into the green bins that the cities take away.
Yeah, and we do have, like I mentioned, the collector portal, so there are resources that are readily available, so you don't need to start from scratch and create something new. Also, if your staff goes on our social media, we often do posts that are material specific, so there'll definitely be something there on flexible plastics, and there should be something on foam. I don't have the feed memorized, but you can always retweet it or repost that as well if you don't want to go through the hassle of creating a whole new post.
Thanks very much.
Well, I think any cheese left on a pizza box is a crime, is it not?
It should be.
Yeah. Councillor Charney.
Does Recycling BC provide community recycling containers so that if we have people walking around downtown and they've got a paper bag and a pop bottle, they could put them in the different containers? Or do we have to buy those things?
So if it's not in the home, we do not provide that. That's part of what's called Streetscape. We do have pilot programs right now going for Streetscape, so we are looking into ways of how we may be able to offer that in the future. So we have a pilot program with the City of North Vancouver and the City of West Vancouver right now. So hopefully they're going well. So we'll see if we can able to roll that out on a more province-wide, but they're still in pilot stage right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. Appreciate your presentation, and we'll start to self-educate a little bit more and make sure that people use their bins correctly. So it is important. So just get you to push that button on the way out there. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. 5.2, we're watching Councillor Ogan to make sure he doesn't have any questions, are we not? Okay, there he is. Okay, 5.2, Ministry of Forests, Patrick Farmer to talk about water conservation, a very timely time for that. So we'll turn it over to Patrick. I'll get you to push that little red button there and we'll get you live. Thank you, Patrick. You're off.
So good evening, Patrick Farmer from the Ministry of Forests, but here I'm also representing the NHAHIP Management Committee, and Brian?
Yeah, and Brian Holmes, I'm a councillor for Upper Nicola, but also participate with Patrick here in their NHAHIP Drought Committee on behalf of Upper Nicola, and just here kind of supporting Patrick, and I'll give my view of it after he does his.
Next slide. So first, not sure, we have done presentations to council before, but it has been a while and most of you guys are new. So first, just an opening slide about kind of who we are. So we're appointed staff from the province as well as Katmuk and Silt Nation community members, community leadership, like folks like Brian. That is who makes up this group. Where's our area of responsibility? We look after the Nicola watershed as a whole. What do we do? Well, this is the decision-making body that handles everything that is drought response related in the Nicola watershed. The reason why this group exists, so previous to this group's involvement, this was handled strictly by the province, ministry staff. And now we've moved towards this new model where we're trying to develop a more integrated drought management program that includes everybody and specifically includes Indigenous and First Nations folks in the Valley to be part of the decision-making process. When did this come about? We are not a brand new group. We've been around for about 3 or 4 years. So we're not new. We have been making these decisions together. The first years we're kind of feeling things out with information sharing and stuff like that, but we've been making shared decisions for about at least 2 years, almost 3. And how do we carry out this work? Well, it's grounded in foundational pieces around protocols and laws from both the Syilx and Katmuk nations. On the Syilx side, we use Grandmother's teachings, and on the Syilx side, we use the 4 food chiefs, and on the Katmuk side, we use Grandmother's teachings. Anything you want to add on that part?
No, there's a little more complexity to it, right? So that's coming from our laws and our stories, our teachings. So it's really being incorporated into this decision making. A lot of it's about principles and just bringing that together and ensuring that Indigenous perspective is included in the discussion and the decisions we make with government.
So that's a little bit about our group. The next piece is we're here to talk about drought. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You folks all live in the beautiful Nicola Valley. You know what you've gone through. May was the hottest on record. We saw records fall across the province and here as well. But this drought actually started back in 2022. Last summer was pretty warm. We didn't have any rain in the fall. Then we got snow. So we didn't have a fall. We went right from summer into winter. And then this spring didn't really exist either. We kind of came out of winter and went right into summer. So we've been in a precipitation deficit for quite some time now. And then freshet came a little bit late, but more or less on time, but then it ended really quickly because May was so hot. So we saw everything. We had a good healthy snowpack, but it came off really fast. And then, like I said, extreme periods of heat in May and July. The forecast was it was always sort of looking the way it's been, warmer than average with possibly less precipitation. And the reality is that people that call the Nicola Valley home, like myself and Brian and all of you, we know that we live in pretty much a desert. You don't get rain in July, you don't get rain in August, and as of late, we haven't seen rain coming in September. And then in terms of where we're at in terms of drought level, we are currently at drought level 4 in the Coldwater. Things look a little bit better up in Brian's neck of the woods. But overall, it's still very dry out there. And thus the fire season that we're, the worst fire season we've ever had, the lack of precipitation issues that we've got, and then a lot of our streams just drying up, the smaller ones especially. So the Coldwater is at drought level 4. I think all of you know that that's where your water comes from, your drinking water. When you turn on that tap, that's where it comes from. It's from the Coldwater River. Not directly, but from aquifers that are hydraulically connected to it. So we're at 4 right now, and we expect that we're probably going to be in drought level 5. We're pretty close to going to drought level 5 even this past Monday, but with temperatures easing over this week and some precipitation expected, we were like, you know what, let's stay at drought level 4 for that. So the impacts of drought. These probably don't all seem super obvious to folks or the general public. And so low stream flow is sort of the most obvious one. And I've got a piece in there, or we've got a piece in there about all beings need cool, or how do you say it in Silk, Brian? Or water. That's what those 3 words mean. All beings need it. We need it, but so does everything else. Nothing grows in the Nicola Valley without water, and nothing can live on planet Earth without water. Other impacts are high water temperatures. Things that are in the stream really struggle with high water temperatures. And in the Coldwater, this past week, when things were really hot, we saw water temperatures above 25 degrees Celsius. And lethal temperatures for fish, amphibians, other things that live in the stream happen about 21. So things were really starting to struggle in the Coldwater specifically. We also see high water use. Farms need more water, ranches need more water as evapotranspiration goes up. So does water use, and so you'll see those sprinklers running a little harder. People water their lawns more. When it's not raining, the lawns keep getting watered, the green spaces keep getting watered. Firefighting, we've had some really bad years where we've actually had to grapple with the idea of should we be leaving that water in the stream versus bucketing it out for fighting fires in the forest. And then, of course, fire prevention. Lots of folks get really nervous and they start turning on their sprinklers around their property, watering basically everything. Food scarcity. So food scarcity for agriculture users, general public that depend on that feed that then develops our food, but also every other being in the watershed starts to run into issues like berries drying up, streams drying up, grass not being there, just things not being healthy, and then that food source isn't there for all the beings in the watershed. People seek out water bodies, and we've seen this a lot. Of course, we see that with the big festivals that we have, like Base Coast. But even here in town, there have been lots of reports of folks building rock weirs and pools in the Coldwater, and those things change the morphology and dynamics of the stream itself. It then cools up the water, which then heats it up, which is what people that want to bathe in the water do, but it creates issues for the things that call the stream home. And so we're really looking for people to stop doing that when the water goes down like it is right now. And then we've noted some pressure on some key species like interior coho, interior spring chinook, which is considered endangered, and steelhead, which is considered endangered. Brian, you want to mention anything on the impacts?
Not yet, no, wait.
So what's the ask from City Council, Mayor and Council? In the short term, we need more water conservation. You guys are doing a great job of moving the dial in the right direction for water conservation, but we still need more. People in Merritt still use a lot more water than the average Canadian does, and that's a problem when you're in a place that doesn't get the average amount of precipitation or have the average amount of water that everybody else does. We're not Ontario. We live in a semi-arid desert. We don't have water daily. So we can't be using more than they're using. So water conservation, we need education and awareness. It's something that the Inhana group is actually looking at doing, is creating materials for education and awareness. Going back to your idea that you suggested with recycling, Adam, we want to get into schools and get talking to the younger people so that they bring it home and tell their parents to turn off the taps or stop watering the lawn or do whatever. But we also need the City of Merritt to do more in that piece too. And we are willing to help. If it's materials, if it's wording, if it's things you need for radio ads, social media ads, newspaper ads, we're happy to help. We're happy to give that information so that you can help spread the word about the different values. Lots of people that I talk to don't even know that we have salmon in this watershed. They have no idea. They've moved here, they're new to the area, maybe they've come from Chilliwack or somewhere on the coast, and they have no idea that we have those. So we need to educate folks. Signage. People don't know when you guys are at drought level 4. It's surprising. You can just walk down the street and ask 10 people. 3 might know what level you're at, which means only 3 people know what water restriction we're supposed to be at. And that's a problem because we're not conserving water. And then this message about more of a holistic approach. All beings are equal and all beings need water and should have access to it. And so we need to get that message out that my life is not any more important than the fish that are in the stream. And so why do I get to take the water out and put it on my lawn when they just need water to be able to survive? So those are the things in the short term. That's the immediate ask. The long-term stuff is we were encouraged to hear that metering is coming to the City of Merritt. My own opinion, it's long overdue, but great. We've secured some grants. We're moving in the right direction because we've seen what that really, when people have to pay for something, it beats any educational program you can have. When they have to pay more for it, they will stop using it. And we saw huge reductions in the City of Kamloops when they put in meters, about 40 or 50%. Water storage. We need to store more water. We need to slow down the water when it comes through. Many people will say that we have a water shortage issue. We have more of a water timing issue. We still have a very strong freshet in most years, but it comes and it goes, and we have no way to slow it down. Our watersheds are beat up from human activity, forestry, fires, ranching, like you name it. We've got Coquihalla highways, we've got Old Kettle Valley railroads. We have a watershed that has a lot been done to it and a lot going on in it. And we need to bring that back. We need to create a watershed that will be more resilient in the future. And you folks have a piece of that right here in the City of Merritt, with the green spaces that you have, with the homes along the riverways. Those are all places where we need to slow the streams down, let it spread out into its floodplain and slow down. Again, long-term planning and development with the idea that this is a finite thing. Water is not something that is a guarantee. When you turn on the tap, it doesn't have to come out. It may not one day. And then we just need to change the way we think about CO2 and water. Brian?
Yeah, I think just in terms of this thought of these short-term and long-term, and it's really coming down, we're getting into a situation where this is the norm. People say this happens every year, which is scary because in reality it's still an emergency, but it's not treated as such. You know, what does happen if we stop having water run through this stream? What happens to this city? What happens to the people living around here? We're going to have to change our lives. And if it's a norm, when things become normal, we stop trying to fix things. So that's the scary part, because it's a big reality on what we're seeing, and we're trying to work collaboratively with government and everybody within here to kind of identify ways to start conserving and protecting what's left. We don't know how long this cycle is going to take for this to run through a drought system, and it seems to get worse, it seems to get better, but they get more extreme. So we really got to acknowledge that part and keep it at the top end of our thoughts, because it influences the growth of this city. It influences how we live and the food that we access outside of anything that comes up and down this thing. And that's not just fish. And we talk about all beings. It's deer, it's moose, it's bears, anything that utilizes the water to drink or to eat from. So it's quite critical in our minds that we need to address this drastically. But, you know, over the years of fighting with government and doing that, the dance here with First Nations and government, we're in a place where we need to work together to do this. And that includes everybody, because we can't do it ourselves. We need help. And, you know, some of the stuff we are suggesting is a bit extreme to some, but at the end of the day, you know, I want my two boys to be able to still live here and have water that, you know, they can swim in. We can't go swimming in Douglas or Nicollet Lake now. You see what was going on out there in the last couple of months. Where do we go? We can't. We have to buy our pool, buy our water to go swimming in a pool, which is not how I grew up. I'm sure most of you didn't grow up like that either. You know, so the metering piece isn't about paying for it. It's about acknowledging what we're using. And once people start to understand that, they start to conserve and say, hey, I need to stop wasting, just like the presentation before us. You know, we got to be a little more creative on how we utilize and work in the environment we're in, because it's changing. We got to change, but we got to be able to survive in it. You know, we're doing pretty decent here this year, I would say, in comparison to the rest of the province on drought. I also do work in the Okanagan, and they're really having struggle over there, working with municipal governments. You know, they've got more storage over there, but there's a struggle to work with the municipal governments to help support fish passage, because they have licenses that they can release water. I don't know what the struggle is, and I don't know if it's a power thing or just a lack of education on why we're trying to conserve and preserve the stuff we do. But, you know, I've been working on this for quite a few years now, and it's getting pretty tiring, you know, to keep having to do this. You know, our only storage is above Nicollet Lake is Chaparral Lake, and that water isn't nice water. It's already algae, you know, it's thick grass clipping algae, and that's our only water for the fish. We shut that off, there's no base flow in the headwaters. So it's a cumulative piece, right? It's logging, it's mining, it's all this stuff. So it's not just use of the city. So we really got to think collectively on taking our part. But we have to start. We can't just say, oh, so-and-so's not doing it. Because if we start, then everybody needs to get on board. So just wanted to share that. You have more?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you. So just a question for myself. Patrick, you mentioned that people were building pools to bathe in and stuff, stop the flow. And then you talk about stopping the flow so we can have water remain in the area longer. What does that look like? I'm assuming that is basically building almost the same thing to slow the flow down, is it not? So if you could just elaborate on that, because it kind of contradicts what you're saying there. If you just could elaborate a little bit more.
So the rock weirs that I'm talking about are built by 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 30-year-olds,
25-year-olds,
30-year-olds that are looking to cool off. So they're building rock weirs across the river. or cutting off parts of the stream. So they're basically removing or slowing down the water. That's very different than allowing the stream to have its floodplain back. It's actually the opposite. And so when I'm talking about slowing the stream down, I'm talking about freshet. I'm not talking about July 25th. And I'm meaning that we need to give the stream more room to have access to its floodplain, the floodplain that's had forever and until now. We've kind of channelized it and we keep narrowing it. And we're not happy when the river all of a sudden takes it back, like in the atmospheric river in 2021. We're like, oh, wait a second, this is not floodplain. And then we go, oh, wait a second. Yeah, if there's water running across my property, then it's here in the floodplain. So that's what I mean.
I think what you're getting at too is those ones we're seeing people build aren't engineered, right? They're not fish passage proof, so they cause issues, right? So they stop fish passage. There's question if it's backing up water and it releases and destroys something, right? So that's the difference. We need a bit of a process to develop storage in a different manner than people just building rock weirs, which
I was just looking for an explanation because it kind of sounded like it was the same but different. Councillor Egan.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. This has been very informative. I've had some contact with a group in town called the Nicola Watershed Project. Are you those people?
Yes.
Okay, so what I've noticed is it's mostly First Nations that are involved in that?
with government.
With government. Are you considering inviting anybody else to join that group?
Yeah, so as we build stuff out, we will start inviting and including stakeholder groups, municipals in the conversation. More on the planning side, with our in Cahib drought piece, we have talked about how do we include the city in these conversations, right? As we build and learn how we do it. So it is on top of mind of how do we start including more, but we needed to figure out how do we work together first, considering our laws and considering government laws. So now we need to start, how do we start including people in these conversations? Because like I said, without that, people don't feel included and they're not going to commit to what we're saying. So yeah, we definitely want to start including people in these conversations, but respectfully, so you feel part of the decision.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate you coming and letting us know about this, and if you go forward with having any, I'd be interested to learn more. Thank you.
Councillor Cherney.
Thank you for the presentation, it was excellent. A large consumer of water are ranches. I've seen on a rainy day the water sprinklers are still on, water 24 hours a day. How can that be controlled? Does the government, does the Nicola Watershed have any governance over ranches to control the amount of water they use?
Yeah, so going back to the decisions that we make together as a group, right now we've asked the irrigation community, which is the ranchers and the farmers, to cut back in the cold water by 50%. We've asked them to cut back by 30% in Nicola. That 50% number also applies to the municipality in the cold water. There's a big misconception about how irrigation works, and I don't want to take up 10 minutes explaining it, but the best time to irrigate is when it's raining. Because here in the Nicola Valley, we don't get an inch or 3 inches of rain. We get, Brian's got a station up at Upper Nicola, and he's got these little, 0.6 of a millimeter or 2 millimeter kind of things. That's the best time to water is when it's doing that. And the amount of water that the wheel line will put down, they're putting down about 3 inches of water before they move their wheel line. Even with a pivot, which are much more efficient and deliver water in a very efficient and different kind of way, they're still putting down over an inch before they're moving on to the next spot. We don't get an inch or inches of rain in Merritt. There's a couple days a year where that actually happens. So when it's raining outside, it's a really good time to irrigate. Irrigation systems are designed to run 24 hours a day, not anything less. And we would rather them running like that versus cranking on the pumps really high to try and irrigate the same amount of area in 8 hours versus doing it over a 24-hour period. Does that help?
No.
No.
You want me to try?
No,
Yeah, Brian,
no, no,
Brian.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying it's a tremendous amount of water being used. Can these crops grow without that amount of water? It's astronomical what we see in the crops, and is it absolutely necessary?
Yeah, so I'd say most of the ranches have storage that support their irrigation piece. And I would say over the years, the ranches have started to, you see pivots being put out on Nicola, right? So they're more efficient in watering. You see corn crops going up. So it changes the timing for watering, where you need more in the spring and summer and less in the fall is when we start having the water issues. So with the corn, they're shutting them off in September when we need water for fish. But with that industry, it's also communicating in conversations, like was asked about, engagement with them as well. And in our neck of the woods in Upper Nickel, we have Douglas Lake Cattle Company, and they hold the most water licenses in that place. And in 21, you recall the heat dome, it was a pretty nasty year for water, and we ended up going away from these ministerial orders and going through legislation and just talking with Douglas Lake and say, can you shut off at this time because the kokanee starts spawning? And they agreed. And when we did that, we noticed that it didn't change a lot. River didn't change when they stopped watering. It wasn't a whole bunch more water added into the system. And what it really told us is the base flow from the headwaters, there's not enough water there for that time of year. So we really got to look at other options. And, ranchers are wanting to work with us to develop those options. They have property up in the areas where we want water. I mean, given the temperatures we're seeing, it's going to be critical that we identify this, or we start getting issues like the algae, right? Because the water is too hot. That's a bit of the problem in Nicola and Douglas Lake lately, is the water temperatures. Like in 21, the surface temperature was 31 degrees. That's pretty lethal for fish, let alone trying to swim in that kind of water. It's pretty gross. So hopefully that answers it.
And ranches, the reality is they do use a lot of water. To give you some perspective, the amount of irrigation water in the cold water is about the same as what the city of Merritt pumps on a regular day. So it's about 150 liters a second coming out for irrigation water in the cold water, and you guys range anywhere from 100 to 300 depending on demand and all sorts of stuff like that, to give you some perspective. And the folks in the cold water have had to turn off 5 of the last 6 years in either the month of August or September. And when they turn off, it's a zero. And we can't expect you to do that. You're a municipality, you can't go to zero. You can't turn everything off. But what we can ask is that you try and do as much as you can, try and get as low as you can.
So just a quick question, your recommendation to the farmers to pull back, how much buy-in do you get on that? And what is your powers to make sure that happens? I'm assuming it's voluntary, I'm assuming.
Well, like Brian said, we're trying to go down a path of getting people to cooperate. In the cold water, for the last 2 years, we've seen a full 100% cooperation rate of like when they shut off. Now, of course, they were shut off by a minister order back in 2015, and that's a really bad place that we had to go at that time. And since then, we've worked with them to turn off voluntarily or cooperate and turn off. And like Brian talked about in the Upper Nicola, we've had very good success with folks turning off irrigation early and then releasing water, which is another additional thing. But as Brian said, the reality is that we just need more and a lot more. When things are really bad, and this year isn't there yet, but we're working our way slowly, and we're actually normally leading the charge in drought in the province, and this year we're probably one of the ones doing better compared to the coast in the north. So, yeah.
So one thing I do notice with people repairing their properties after the flood, a lot of people are xeriscaping rather than going back to grass. So
that's great.
You can count on the city that when it comes to time to shut off at our parks and stuff, it'll be done, no problems. I don't water my lawn at all anymore, probably won't, because it'll come back. So we're quite aware of it. Actually, a yellow lawn is now the in thing, I think, to a certain degree. Councillor Charney.
You mentioned that having a sign out for which stage of water restrictions you're in. I just came back from a trip on Vancouver Island and from top to bottom. And it was very interesting. We would go into these different communities and they would have the large sign, what stage their water level was. And, you know, maybe that's something we should look into for.
We have a.
Do we? No, but that's drought.
That's fire.
the drought level.
No,
the water stage.
We have the one going up the Grasslands Hill that nobody ever moves the dial on.
But that's the drought level. The stage is your watering, you know, your 4 stages of watering level.
Oh, okay.
That one, and that's really interesting because there it is right there. Okay, on stage 1, I can water this many days and what hours. Stage 2, and it goes up. And that was really interesting to see from stage 1 to 4, all along the Vancouver Island. So maybe that's something we could look in for public education.
So we would really encourage that. I think where you have fire danger signs, you just put a drought sign on top of it. Your bylaw is actually tied to the drought level, so your water restriction level is the same as the drought level. And that sign that's on the way up to Grass Hills, that was actually put in by the Nicola Community Roundtable. They're more or less, a pretty quiet group now, and that sign just needs to be taken down. No one's managing it.
It's actually wilting.
Yeah. Be taken down or replaced with a new one is really what needs to happen.
I agree. I drove by it the other day and I thought, what is this thing doing here? Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you very much again. Good to see you. Good to see you both. And we will do our level-headed best because it is a resource that we all depend upon. So, and it's a responsibility to make sure we have it. So thank you very much. Very timely. I appreciate it. Just get you to push that button on the way out there, Patrick. Please.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5.3, Thompson Rivers University Students Union. Good day. Good day to you.
I'll just get my screen shared here. And yeah, we've got a short presentation for you folks. Go ahead and now.
Okay, thank you so much, Leaf. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. And thank you for having us here today. My name is Anel, and I'm the Vice President External at Ontario Student Union.
And I guess I didn't introduce myself. My name is Leaf. I work as a staff person coordinating a lot of our sort of external advocacy work on behalf of students for the Student Union.
And today we are here to talk about the local decision making at TRU and the campaign that we've been working on for the past couple years now called Academocracy, which aims to change the TRU sentence structure to give students meaningful voice. So our goal is to have the provincial government to amend the TRU Act in order for our governance system to reflect that of research universities in BC. So, and why does this issue matter to you folks? Well, for multiple reasons. And first things first, Thompson Rivers University has a huge role in our community. There's a big number of students studying here in person and online with more than 60,000 alumni who now work across the province and the country in a variety of fields. Also, TRU has a substantial regional economic contribution of $705 million annually and about $1.5 billion contribution to the provincial economy each year. So that speaks loud about TRU's contribution to growth and development of our region and province.
So how did TRU get to having sort of such an important role in our region? I'll just go through a little bit of history. I'll try to go fairly quickly because it's probably familiar, I would say, to many of you listening. But TRU was founded as Caribou College in 1970. Originally, there was only 2-year programs offered and students transferred out to larger institutions, sort of in the Lower Mainland and things like that. 1989, we became the University College of the Caribou, offered full 4-year bachelor degrees at that time. 2003 started expanding, I would say, our purpose further into sort of research and higher level, university areas. We had our first Canada Research Chair appointed, 3 master's programs started being offered at that point. 2005 is when we became, sort of the modern version as we know now of Thompson Rivers University. We merged with what was called at the time BC Open University, which is now Open Learning. to sort of become a full university across BC. 2011, sort of a lot of development has happened in here. You could choose to highlight other things as well, but we opened the first law school in Canada in over 30 years. And we also joined what was called the Research University Council of British Columbia, RUCBC. It's essentially a group that's sort of us, UBC, SFU, UVic, UNBC, all of the large institutions in BC, research institutions essentially. Where are we now? 2023. We now offer 9 master's programs. There's 7 Canada Research Chairs here, as well as 3 provincial ones. So we've expanded a lot from our sort of roots as a college. So conversely, in terms of some history, what's happened in terms of governance, that's kind of what we're here to talk about today is governance. 1970, we were governed by actually the local school board when we were founded. 1977, we got our own board, but we didn't have necessarily sort of our own governance on the education side at that point. 1989, we gained an education council, had 4 students on at the time when we became University College of the Cariboo. 2005, we received what is now called a Senate that basically makes all of the academic-based decisions for Tier U, but the structure was largely unchanged from that 1989 model. 2023, sort of despite all those other changes I talked about, no governance changes since we became a university, essentially. And so we essentially have gone from this, I believe this is from the early 80s, I think 82, if my memory serves. This is what Tier U looked like, pretty different. This is where we've gone to now, essentially. A lot has changed over that same time period, but the way we make decisions at Tier U is still largely the same for students and their families.
All right, so let's narrow a little bit more on what Tier U does and what it looks like, what Tier U Senate does, what it looks like. So the Senate is the highest academic decision-making body in university, and it impacts such areas as academic mission and strategy, educational policy and regulation, course and program options. So essentially, the Senate determines what kind of education will be offered to students in our region. So, okay, let's delve into the details of our current Senate structure at TRU and then explore why it matters. The diagram here illustrates the composition of our Senate as follows. So in blue, you can see we have 15 administrators. There are 22 faculty members in red. And in green, we have only 4 students on the Senate with no requirement of representing different levels, different areas of university, and also a couple of other seats as well. So, and the problem with current Senate structure is that, as you can see, we have, it has a lot of administrators, which is due to our roots as a college, and as they have a lot of top-down decisions making structures. And so what's the solution to that? So we are proposing the structure which is currently exists in such universities as UBC Okanagan, UVic, SFU, and so on. So, and that's how it's gonna look like. And here you can see the distinction between our current Senate structure and the Research University Senate structure. So in blue, in terms of administrators, there's no change. And in terms of faculty members, from 22, it will go up to 30. And you can see that in red over here. And in terms of students, from 4 student positions, it will go up to 15 student seats in the Senate with the requirement of representing each and every school and faculty at TRU and couple other seats as well. So, and what you can see is this would shift us from being more of a top-heavy administrative Senate to having more students and faculty in decision making. So, and this is a part of the transition of being a college, which we used to be a full university that trusts our campus community to make decisions.
There's one other reason we're sort of looking to try to make this transition, which might be more relevant to you folks sort of thinking about this municipally or regionally. And essentially that is money, funding from the provincial government. So what you're seeing now is basically a graph of funding levels for every public post-secondary education institution in BC. It's shown on a per student basis. Tier U in black there, we get just over $9,000 per student from the provincial government. That's only for domestic students. Provincial average around $12,000. We're quite a bit below the average, and we're sitting at 21st out of 25 institutions in BC. How does that compare to other sort of, I would say, similar institutions that used to be colleges that are now universities? Provincially, they call them special purpose teaching universities. I've highlighted them here in black. That's places like Capilano, Vancouver Island University, Kwantlen Polytechnic, University of the Fraser Valley. You can see basically they're all sort of on the lower half in terms of how much funding they get provincially. We contrast that to the research institutions. I'll highlight those in green here. They're all sort of in the top half, essentially, in terms of per student funding. And so TRU is an institution that sort of straddles somewhere in the middle. We sort of defy, I would say, easy classification in this area. If you ask some people, they'll tell us we're really focused on teaching. And if you ask other people, they'll tell you we're research at the university. So we're trying to basically push us, I would say, for governance reasons, but also I would say there's some funding reasons as well that would impact, have some impacts more broadly in the community and the region, more in that research direction. Okay, coming towards the end here, why are we asking for your support? You're probably sitting there a bit puzzled saying, this is not a municipal issue. You clearly can't decide this. Why are we talking to you about this? Well, it's a provincial issue, essentially. They decide it through a piece of legislation that's called the Thompson Rivers University Act. We have our own act, basically, that governs us and governs governance structures and classification in that way, and that governs TRU. Us as the TRU Students' Union, TRUSU down there, we're basically trying to convince the provincial government to make some amendments to that act. As you can probably imagine, it's pretty difficult for us as one student union, or even for the institution as one university, to convince the provincial government they should open up a piece of legislation. So that's basically why we're sort of branching out from just talking to people on campus about this, which we've done quite extensively, and talking to you folks sort of in our broader region, municipalities and things like that, because we're hoping that you can kind of see the importance of an issue like this and essentially help us to amplify our voice in terms of governance modernization at TRU, and help the provincial government essentially take notice of that. And then I would say one other reason why you might care about this is, at its heart, this is essentially about sort of meaningful local input into decision making. We want to make sure that students from every community in our region, because TRU is the place where people from all across our region, I grew up in Lillooet, come for their education, and we want to make sure that they can participate essentially in shaping their education, the university where they attend. We think that's really important, and we thought that you folks as sort of local government decision makers would sort of understand that pretty acutely, the importance of local representation. If you want to help us at all in this, how can you support us? Pretty simple, really. Essentially, pass sort of a general motion is really all we're asking. We've got about 100 letters of support from faculty members at TRU. We've got over 1,500 students who've sort of signed things in support as well. And so I put a sample motion up on the screen. It doesn't have to be this motion. Essentially something that would sort of, in principle, generally call for sort of a review or a modernization of TRU's governance to sort of bring us more in line with research institutions in the province. And then essentially just share that with us in writing in some form. That's our whole presentation. I know it was a lot of information. We're trying to be sort of as succinct as possible to respect your time. So we're happy to take any questions you folks might have.
Questions? Councillor Ogan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So I'd like to know if this request is coming from the TRU faculty in cooperation with the TRU Student Union.
I would say it's coming just from the TRU Students Union in terms of this specific request. We do have a letter of support on this issue from the TRU Faculty Association, because in terms of these governance changes, it would expand the number of faculty fairly substantially. And I think a lot of faculty members also see the value in including students. We didn't get it really into it in this presentation because we didn't want to get too into the weeds, but part of this would be making sure that students from every different faculty and school within TRU would have representation on the Senate, along with faculty members. And so I think there's a bit of natural alignment there in terms of sort of representing, for example, the faculty of law or the faculty of arts or the faculty of business and things like that as well, right? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And I also like to know how many municipalities have been approached and how many municipalities have passed the proposed motion.
You're our very first presentation. We've sent requests to, all of the ones in sort of, I would say, the college catchment region here, sort of surrounding Kamloops and surrounding area that sort of TRU essentially serves in terms of its education. And so we've got, I think, 4 or 5 other presentations scheduled. But yeah, obviously you're our first, so.
Thank you.
For that. I think what we'll probably do is take this as an information item, so we can discuss it a little bit more to see if we want to, just so we can discuss this a little bit more. It would be not a good idea to do this tonight, but we'll take this as an information item, and we will get you an answer, and do appreciate your presentation tonight, so thank you very much. Yep. Oh, hold on one second, Mr. Laos.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to explain a little more to anyone who's unfamiliar. The way our procedure bylaw works is that any request made by delegation, it's automatically deferred to the next council meeting, because as Leif noted, there's been quite a lot of information tonight. So essentially, to give council time to dwell on things, the formal request is then put on the next agenda, which is for our August 22nd meeting. And then if council wish to discuss it at that time, then that would result in a decision either way. So.
Thank you. So we won't forget you. We'll be back. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Moving on to 6.1, Parcel Tax Review Panel. Mr. Laos, could you take this one?
I absolutely can, Your Worship. So this one, of course, so at the June 13th council meeting, council created a parcel tax review panel, which is required to meet by law, and set a date of July 11th. Unfortunately, with Councillor Newman's tragic death, all of the meetings on July 11th were cancelled, which included that review panel. And also, at the June 13th meeting, there was some discussion about the membership, which ultimately resulted in Councillor Newman being appointed to it. And so, therefore, we currently need to set both a new date and a new membership. We, as staff, we think the next appropriate date to meet will be August 8th, 2023 at 5 p.m. The existing membership that was set was Councillor Etchart, Mayor Getz, and then Councillor Charney had expressed interest in being on the panel, but there were some date conflicts which resulted in Councillor Newman being on it instead. And so if you are all available at August 8th at 5 p.m. and would like to appoint those 3 members, bearing in mind we can have virtual attendance like Councillor Olguin is at this meeting, then that would be ideal for us. If alternatively, if you do want a different date, then I should note the newspaper has yet to be published, but we have put a tentative advert in for this one with that date and time. So if you do want to change it, then please let us know ASAP.
Thank you. So I guess question would be, is Councillor Charney, would you like to be on this?
I would like to be on the committee. I would have to attend virtually on August 8th.
We can arrange that.
Okay.
Going on holiday, right?
Sorry, yes, again.
Okay, so I'll read the recommendation. Recommendation that staff be instructed to advertise for the parcel tax review panel to meet at 5 p.m. on August 8th, 2023. Yep, I need a motion. It's a motion. I need a mover. It's a recommendation. I need a mover. Council. Oh, thank you, Councillor Ogan from some deep within. There he is. Any questions on that? Your mic is on there, Councillor Chairman.
Sorry.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Second recommendation that Councillor Etchart, Mayor Getz, and Councillor Charney be appointed as the members of the Parcel Tax Review Panel. Councillor Petrosi, Councillor Etchart, any questions on that? Where are you going for holidays? Good, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. I see Councillor Ogan is a little time delayed, so was that an opposition or? Thank you very much. Nothing on bylaws. New business. 8.1, 3350 Vote Street and 3155 Grimmett Street request for reconsideration of invoices. I'm going to ask for this to be deferred. And the reason being deferred is the fact that Mrs. Rolene sent me a letter wanting to know if we could have a meeting to talk about this before it got to this point, and I said we would. So we haven't had the ability to have that meeting yet. So I feel that this would be a bit of a bushwhack if we moved on it tonight without the meeting. So I would appreciate if we could arrange a meeting, because we said we would have the meeting. So I think we kind of got the cart before the horse here. So we would like to arrange a meeting with all the parties so we can discuss it and get some more information. I just don't think it's fair to do it here tonight. So.
Did you want to put a resolution forward for deferral of this item?
I do believe defer just means we no longer talk about it and it moves on to the next, we get the situation. So if we could arrange a meeting, that would be appropriate. So.
Absolutely, Council. We'll do
Thank
it.
you.
Our staff will do that.
So Susan, we will definitely work with you to make, so we can have this meeting. So. Sorry to make you come all the way out, but it's just we had agreed to a meeting and it has not happened. So I don't want to give say, yeah, we're going to have a meeting and it doesn't happen. I don't think that's the way to do this. So sorry for you coming out tonight, and you're free to go, but we'll arrange the meeting. So thank you. Uh, 8.2, draft 2022 audited financial statements. To be introduced by Mr. Mario Pierotti, BDO. Mario, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So we are here to present the audited financial statements for the City of Merritt for the year ended December 31st, 2022. I do have a brief PowerPoint that I'd like to put on screen to make it easier for everyone to follow along. And so while that comes up, I'll just speak to, we are now.
Could I just get you to, hold on, can I get you to reopen the door? The doors have to be open during a public meeting. No problem. Yeah, no, doors have to be open during a public meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, though. Mario, back to you.
Okay, so our audit is substantially complete, and although the financial statements that you have in your package are marked draft, once council has had the chance to approve the financial statements, I'll be able to sign off on the audit report. And if it is council's pleasure to approve the statements, we are proposing a clean audit opinion. So these statements do present fairly the financial position of the City of Merritt for the year ended December 31st, 2022. And so we'll move into the numbers. And starting on the statement of financial position, what we'll see is that there is a lot of volatility in the statements right now because of what happened with Atmospheric River in 2021, and now with the recovery efforts in play. We're seeing that your your financial assets have increased, moving from $27 million to $51 million. But likewise, your liabilities, excluding your MFA debt, have increased from 13 million to 34.8 million. And so because of that, your net financial position hasn't changed very much, from 6.3 million to just under $8 million. And so what's important to remember is that when we look at the financial assets, there is a lot of government funding that was received in advance, and we see that your short-term investments are up to $23 million right now. Your accounts receivable have increased by $4 million this year over last. But on the liability side, your deferred revenue is up by $24 million because of the emergency funding. So because there is money that was received in advance that will be spent, this is why we see that those inflated amounts. But at the end of the day, your net financial position hasn't moved significantly. And it's also important to note that management has been prudent in making sure that the money received that isn't going to be spent is being placed in GICs. It is a favorable interest rate environment from that perspective. And so we have significant investment income this year because of that as well. And if we look, we'll also see that your tangible capital assets have increased from 70 million up to $74 million. This increase is net of amortization or your depreciation. And just as a reminder, when we look at your capital projects this year, it's not your traditional capital projects that you have. It's a lot of, the water filtration basin, rebuilding of sidewalks, rebuilding of roads. Those are the types of things that have been going into your capital over the past year, not just adding on to facilities. So that's why we're seeing an unusually high increase in your tangible capital assets. If we move to the next slide, We have your total revenues as compared to budget and to actuals. Budget being the blue, actual the middle column, and your prior year 2021 on the right columns there. Total revenues came in at just over $31 million versus a budget of $24.5 million. And we can see that there's a couple of areas where we did have increases. Obviously, at the far right, insurance proceeds at $2.3 million, which aren't budgeted and is part of the recovery process. Our government grants and transferred, being the third stack that you have there, did come in just under budget, but is up significantly from last year. And again, that is grant infrastructure funding for the rebuild. For the grants that didn't come in, those capital projects didn't work or didn't commence, so that's just a timing issue, didn't impact your budget. And we see that user fees, sales and rentals increased from 5.2 last year, or sorry, stay consistent at 5.2 last year and this year, but is up from the $4.9 million budget. Increased activity at the airports with fuel sales and landing fees, and then also when we look at your rec budget was very modest, which was consistent this year across all the municipalities that I work with, just because coming out of COVID, we wanted to be conservative on those items. And if we move on to the next slide, this just breaks down how much revenue you have, or where the revenue is in terms of the piece of the pie that makes up that $31 million. If we turn now to the next page, we'll see our expenses. And so total expenses came in at $25 million versus a budget of 21.4 and last year at $22 million. We do see some significant increases over budget. The first item, obviously, protective services. That is where the bulk of your recovery administration and a lot of the recovery costs have been going. We also see that in general government, we're over budget as well, and that is because of some of the salaries and benefits relating to the rebuild projects. The other major item where we were over budget was on transportation services to the tune of about $400,000 over budget. And this is where a lot of the pre-work or prep work to start the rebuilding of things like roads and your network happens, so the repairs of that side. But overall, if we take the noise of the recovery out, as you hear me referring to it quite a bit, what we'll see is that your expenses would have actually been very much in line with budget, which I think is a good credit to management in an inflationary environment that we have right now. To be able to come in on budget if we're not looking at things like the recovery is quite a good thing to see. So we'll move one more slide on the expenses and talk about surpluses. But this slide just breaks down your total expenses between your operating expenses, salaries, and your depreciation. And so we'll move on to the next slide now, and we'll talk about your change in net financial position. Your annual surplus this year came in at $6 million, and while it's not on this slide, versus a budget of $7 million. And as a reminder, you did approve a balanced budget, or previous council approved a balanced budget at the start of the 2022 year. But because the financial statements do not align with how you prepare your budget, we do have some differences here. But this slide hopes to demonstrate that how we did against our balanced budget. And if we start with an annual surplus of $6 million, deduct the expenses for our capital projects of 6.8, add back depreciation at 2.4, a couple of other adjustments, and we get to a change in our net financial position of 1.6 million, which is really your cash surplus for the year. And again, in the environment that you have with a lot of change happening and a lot of inflation, that is actually a modest surplus is good to see. And so now we'll move on to your overall surplus. And I didn't talk about this on our first slide, and this is your total accumulated surplus is sitting at $82 million, which everyone will look at me and say, we don't have $82 million in the bank, even with the recovery funding. And so I wanted to break this slide down because included in that $82 million is what we call investment in your tangible capital assets of $66 million. And what that number represents is if we take all that we've spent historically on our infrastructure and our assets, and then deduct the depreciation on it, deduct what we still owe on it, that's what we've historically spent. So think about it as the equity in your house. So we don't have that money available to spend. So when we think about a surplus of $82 million, knowing that $66 million is not really cash, you're really left with $15 million in cash surplus, which is broken down into your unrestricted of $10 million, and then your reserve funds are listed here, which are sitting at $5.4 million. So I'll pause here and just open it up for any questions that you may have on this or anything that I didn't cover before we quickly touch on the audit results.
Council, any questions? Can we check on Councillor Hogan, see if he has a question? I'm not sure. Any questions, Council, at all?
No, thank you. The detailed information, so it has clarified my concerns.
Okay. And so if we just move to the last slide, we just want to quickly touch base on the audit results. And as mentioned, we are substantially complete on the audit. Our audit, we were able to come in and execute pretty much the way we had planned it. We did have one deviation from the audit approach that we had just because of some sign-offs that weren't on the documentation, but the testing revealed that everything was in order and there was no anomalies there. So that is good. We had a couple of recommendations that we discussed in the closed meeting, but overall the internal controls that we tested were operating effectively. Going to the last bullet point, we also want to highlight that, we did do testing of transactions with management and council, and also when we do testing of transactions with council, we also look at your information packages filed when you run for office, and we also don't look at transactions with you personally, but with any companies that you may have, and we didn't identify anything unusual there. And then the third bullet, just moving away back up, want to highlight the amount of effort that is being put into the recovery areas and in the finance areas. It is a lot of work, and we want to encourage the finance team to work with the recovery team more closely, just so as things move into the mature stage of the recovery, I think it's important for them to work hand in hand, because this is the phase where the province might change how they're delivering funding. Different things come in, and so we want to make sure that they're working as a cohesive team. With that, I'll open it up for any other questions.
Any questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Brody. I appreciate it, all your hard work and your presentation. So I will read the recommendation. The recommendation is that council, in accordance with Section 167 of the Community Charter, the City of Merritt consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2020 be accepted. Councillor Egan, Councillor Petrosi, any questions on that? All in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you very much. 8.3, restoration of track surface in Vote Park, to be introduced by Mr. Strang, who I don't see here. Okay. Okay, we'll push this to the end. 8.4. 8.4, MFA financing wildland fire truck to be introduced by Mr. Nakanimi. Yes, sir.
Your Worship, recommending that Council authorize $406,260 to be borrowed under Section 175 of the Community Charter from the Municipal Finance Authority for the purchase of a wildland fire truck as per the 23 to 27 financial plan. This will be completed through the equity financing program that they offer.
Thank you. So I'll repeat the recommendation. The Council authorized $406,260 to be borrowed under the Section 175 of the Community Charter from the Municipal Financing Authority for the purchase of a wildland fire truck. Councillor Egan, Councillor Etchart. That's the second recommendation. We'll do the first one first, and then we'll move on to the second one. It's a good deal. Any questions on that motion?
Thank you. I would just like Kevin to explain to the listening public exactly what a wildland fire truck would be used for.
Certainly. So this would be a replacement truck. We're a little overdue on our current one, and so this is an opportunity to replace our existing unit, bring it up to today's standards and certification, and ensure that it offers robust firefighting capacity.
But what is a wildland fire truck?
If you do not know, I can answer that for you. In the past, it's a truck that is designed to go off-road. It's not lowered. It's usually four-wheel drive. It usually carries bigger tanks. It's to get to a wildfire as quickly as possible before the air crews can get there. We've had one in the past, and it just kind of timed out. But it's designed to go off-road. It's not your typical lowered big thing. It's usually a 3/4 ton pickup truck that is designed for off-road use to get to these fires as quick as possible. And they wear out quite quickly, to be honest, because they do get used a lot. So, and because the last one we had, I think, was like a 1979, but it was still running. So, and in the past, I do believe the forestry had provided a truck at some point in time. There we go, kind of like that. Yeah, there it is on the screen. Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry.
I guess I'm piggybacking on Councillor Egan. Where in town is this truck going to be used?
It's not for town.
So we're buying it for the town, but it's not. It's going to be used like up behind the bench area.
Where did the chief go?
Yeah. So you know, I understand it's off road. But as soon as we get off-road, we're outside the city limits.
I'm sure it could be used within the city, but it would also be available to be used out of the city. So it probably would see dual usage. Am I guessing here, Bob, or are you familiar with the wildland fire truck?
Wildland fire truck, as you were saying, is a much higher base unit. Can be bigger than the one you're showing. I believe in the drawings that you have is an off-road vehicle. And we can use it up behind bench. It can go out the lower neck. I believe we have a agreement with GNRD and for fire, and it can be used out there. But basically, it's for close in city, like the fire we had last year or the year before, where was down by the Lions on Highway 8 above there, where the power pole snapped, dropped power lines, and the fire started and went up the hill. That'd be a bridge truck to get it back.
So the recommendation is on the floor. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Richard.
No, just the comments. In the past, the description was given as something that was able to get the crews to areas where the big tankers can't go. The fire engines are too low to get into some of the hills, so that's why it's needed. So it doesn't go far from Merritt, but it does go out a lot to go to different areas and target areas where attention is needed for our firefighters. So, and I think it's wearing out. So.
And it does give a little bit of further, it's more safety, and it helps people relax a little bit more knowing that we have one of these trucks ready to go. So I'm not sure what it does for our insurance, if it makes it any lighter, I don't know. So on that recommendation, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second recommendation, that the loan be repaid within 5 years with, yep. He's delayed. He's delayed. That's why I waited. He's delayed. You're just delayed by about 2 seconds there, Councillor. So I've been watching. Second recommendation, that the loan be repaid within 5 years with no right of renewal. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Petrosi. Any other questions on that? Those in favor? Opposed? Excellent. So while we wait for Mr. Strang to get here, could we take just a quick 5-minute break here? Since this is such a large situation here, so we will adjourn for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll be back. Thank you. Okay, we are back. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time a little bit to 8.3. We're going to talk about the restoration track surface in Vote Park, to be introduced by Mr. Sean Strang. The mic is yours. Hit that again. There you go.
There we go. Thanks, Your Worship. So Vote Park track is one of the thankfully fairly few restoration projects that we have left. With the exception of the bridge, I think we'll have basically everything wrapped up by the 2-year mark here. So Vote Park track before was built, as far as I can tell from the historical satellite imagery, sometime between 1954 and 1968. And the old track was not particularly oval, although it was supposed to be an oval. Because of the layout and orientation of the track, it had not been able to be previously used for provincial qualifying meets. So we had a kind of red rock surface on there before, oblong track, couple of long jump pits, and a 100-meter sprint. During the flood, it was wiped out. And so as a result of that, the financing that happens, and I'm just kind of ad-libbing because I wrote this like a month ago and I don't remember everything in there. So as a result of the flood, we can get funding to restore it back to the exact same condition that it was before, which is a 6-lane oblong oval with some red rock crush over clay. Another option that we analyzed was what happens if we put it to 8 lanes and put a more modern polymer surface. And then we looked at a middling option of what happens if we put it to 8 lanes and a competitive surface that's not polymer. So what we're recommending at this point is the middling option. So the lower option is 100% paid for, but the province did advance funds from the Municipal Affairs Contribution Agreement that was originally submitted back in January of 2022 and granted in April of the same year. Part of that Treasury Board, or part of that Municipal Affairs Contribution Agreement was for the track, and it was about $500,000, which is the difference between what we had and what is going to end up being a competitive 8-lane proper oval. The additional money over and above that to turn it into a polymer surface, we're not recommending that at this point because it is going to be another almost $1 million over and above that, and that we don't have previous money for, and so it would have to just come out of basically city reserve funds if we were to pursue that option right now. That being said, with the option that we are recommending at this point, it would end up with the surface being appropriate for use in a competitive sense in a provincial track meet, and it would already be prepped for adding polymer in the future if we were to look for grants, and we would be able to just lay polymer right on top of it basically if we qualified for an active park grant that would allow us to do that. So that is the rundown.
Thank you very much. Question, Councilor Charney.
Okay, I have concerns. Basically, I'm a bit of an expert on tracks. Since 7 years, I spent every day on one. I personally disagree with the option. A cinder track, there's no other cinder track in British Columbia right now. Anyone coming here will not have the spikes to run on a cinder track because they only have spikes for the synthetic surfaces. I don't think you could run any provincial track meet on a cinder track. I'm not too sure. You'll never get a record on a cinder track. So my option would be to go with polymer right away. I think we would have to beg, borrow, but not steal the money to find some money. Is this going to be a certified track so that if we do have a provincial track meet, records can be recorded? Or, it has to be certified?
We've, good to answer, okay. Thank you. Councillor Turner through the mayor. That would be a question I would have to send to the engineers, but that was one of the predications of the bid that went out, is that it would be a certified track.
Okay.
So.
Now, one of the biggest users in town is school district. Have they contributed any money or have been asked to contribute any money towards this track?
We are under discussions with SD58, so we have reached out a couple of different times. That is on a city staffer desk right now. It wasn't, there wasn't the indication that there was a significant amount of money beyond a fairly token contribution, but we continue to explore that as a possibility.
Well, okay, I think that if they don't want to contribute, then maybe we, as in other city facilities, we rent it out. I'm just trying to.
It would be beyond my expertise.
Yes, I agree. It's beyond mine too. I'm just shooting bullets here. But I would personally like to see this. If we're going to do the track, I think we have to find money and put the polymer in right away to attract, because you're not going to attract very many track meets with a cinder track. You know, that's, and I talked to a fellow last night about it, and he said it would be basically just for a jogging, because it's just not a certified track, or it's not going to attract people to come to for a big track meet.
So if that's the wish of council, then certainly a motion could be put forward at that point to explore and put into. We've already run an RFP, so we do know what the cost, but to put into a potential budget amendment at that point, and that would likely run through finance, not ROC. So ROC is kind of the restoration. We're a little bit outside of our ROC box, just putting it to a different track surface, track diameter, track width. And we've been able to attract funding through the province to do that change. And Rick, Public Works, has been involved in the process, doing a bunch of the drawings, liaising with the engineers. So Rick's quite into it. It's been a bit of an interdepartmental thing. Beyond that, it would likely be more of a city project to bring somebody in to do the polymer after. Of course, the RC could use our project managers to do that, but it would be outside of a normal recovery project, and it would have to be running through finance for a budget amendment at this time.
Okay, and secondly, are we going to have a sign out on the street somewhere advertising what's happening in there, and maybe a picture of the new track?
So we had a meeting with communications 2 weeks ago now, discussing what the time was, what the timeline was, and what the contractor was going to be doing, what the drawings for the project looks like. So that would be a question that you would have to pose to communications for what their plan is on that one.
Okay, thank you.
So for myself, I am going to go with the recommendation. I understand the cinder track probably is not the best, but at least kids can practice on it. I feel that if we go to polymer, we would have to probably do that through a grant system. I don't think putting $1 million into that park for a track that's going to be used once or twice a year is kind of worth the price. So I'm going to go with, and I appreciate your knowledge, but at least we can get kids. I have been approached by certain people that have found out about this and said that they would be happy to have a real track where they could actually run on it and get, that we might not be able to get records on it, but at this point, this is a build back over a few number of years, and I do believe along the way we can probably find grant funding to take it to the track that we want, but that's just me. Councillor Richard.
Thanks for the report. I was wondering if we were to go with option 3 with the polymer, will the DFA funding still apply and give us the 440 towards that? Because if you're building what was lost, if they'll still apply that, would we be looking for about 900,000 then? Or would we be looking, because if the whole project is the 1.3 and we still got the 440, would we just have to do a budget amendment for that, or no?
Sorry, I'm not sure if it's phrased properly in here. So whatever option we do, we've managed to convince DFA that they're going to pay us the 440. So okay. We could pave it in gold, and they would still pay us the $440
Because
towards
you're
that.
replacing the damaged property with like kind of quality. Well, with an
Yes,
improvement.
yeah,
but
it was a fairly significant policy-driven discussion over a long period of time in order to do that, because that's not a normal DFA thing. So we have convinced them that that $440 will be paid regardless of the option that we do. The $1 million price tag is what will be required to do a cinder surface with 8 lanes in a proper oval. It's fairly complicated behind what's covered, what's not covered, because it was oblong before. There's compaction needed, there's grading needed, there's sprinklers needed, etc. And then there's an additional $1 million above that required for the polymer surface.
Was this not an insured location under the city's commercial policy? I'm only wondering because really, with blanket bylaw coverage and commercial insurance, sometimes they look at the cost of improvements on a site, and if you replace a damaged property on the same site as the damage, sometimes there's some coverages that way, but I don't think they would give you anything to do an improvement, but.
So I'm not the expert on the insurance. We've been handling some of the insured projects, but this one, another city staffer is handling the insurance portion of that. So the insurer said, again, hearsay through another city staffer, that the insurance is not covering it because there is particular limits on outdoor paving covered surfaces that include sidewalks, parking lots, tracks, etc. So we've hit that limit in other projects, and so it can't be applied to this project.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Egan.
Okay, my question is basically about, so you said we're going to get the 440,000. So then in option 2, it says that option will cost the city 503. So is that 440 plus the 503? Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. It's probably not phrased particularly well in that one, but yes, that would be 500 in addition to what DFA is going to cover.
Okay, so what I'm asking now is it just the polymer synthetic surface over top of the, if we change the surface later on, is that still going to cost us 1.3 million, or what would the synthetic polymer actually cost? That track portion cover.
Thank you, Councilor Egan, through the mail. We basically put out an RFP in order. Again, this is a very, very complex project with DFA because of how it's unfolded. So we put out an RFP saying, more or less, what's it going to cost for this base prep? What's it going to cost for the base prep and the cinder the way it was before? What's it going to cost for base prep and cinder on a new oval? And what's it going to cost for polymer on a new oval? So what you're seeing are the delta differences for that. I don't have a quote to say what would a vendor charge to come in down the road and just mobilize and do polymer. What I can tell you is that that additional price delta that's listed on there is a subcontractor. So it wouldn't be the direct prime contractor that would be doing that polymer track. So I would imagine it would be very similar in cost if we did that at a later time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Charney.
In the past, School District 58 maintained that track. They lined it, etc. And every windstorm or rainstorm, the lines left. Who will be if it's a cinder track, who will be maintaining that track and lining it?
That isn't contemplated in the rebuilding of it. It would be presumed that however it was happening before is how it will continue to be happening. So we are examining the rebuild of it, not necessarily the long-term maintenance of that track facility. That would revert back to Public Works. Or School District 58 as it may be in this particular case.
Can I continue?
Yep.
I think that's really important that we have to discover who is going to maintain it. I mean, they manually walked around and every year it changed, you know, where the 200 meter was, where it changed constantly. If you're contemplating having track meets, people coming in, it has to be consistent. It has to be done properly. And it can't be done the morning of a track meet, because now we're looking at an 8-lane official track. And you can't do that the morning of a track meet like they've done in the past. So I think that that's one thing that we do have to look at, is who is maintaining it. If it's city owned, maybe we have to look at the city maintaining this track. And also with the cinder track, you have to remember every time we have wind, that track leaves. And no one really cared about the red track, you know, because it got less and less every year. But if, you know, we're putting all this money in, we have to consider that on the cinder track, that, you know, your wind is going to take that away.
Yeah, understood.
So, but I think it's really important to discuss who is going to maintain that and line it.
So I see a member of the public standing up. Peter, you have something to, just hold on a second, Peter. The way we work this is if we have someone from the public who wants to speak, you have to have council ultimate approval for Peter to come forward. Is that okay? Peter, please come forward. And I don't know what a rancher has to tell us, but please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I have a particular expertise in this, and so I'd be constrained to not speak to it. I was a competitive track athlete for about 10 years at the national and international level. I coached in Vancouver, and I was also involved in various tracks that were restored over those years. I was the director of the Canada Summer Games when they were in Burnaby in 1979. So I think I know of what I speak. I caution you against installing another cinder track. I applaud the effort to put in a full 8-lane track, but I can tell you that a cinder track requires a lot more than simply lining. They are subject to intensive maintenance. I trained for my early years at Rockton Oval in Vancouver. It was a cinder track. I think it may be one of the last ones left. It's in a mess. It's in a mess because the Parks Board has not budgeted to maintain that track. And so all the athletes who are competing in the Vancouver area or training end up going out to Richmond or to Burnaby, to Swangard, to some of these other polymer tracks, as we call them. The maintenance on a cinder track is intensive. Unless it's considered as part of the rebuild, you're getting yourselves into a situation where, in my respectful opinion, what's going to happen is 2 years, 3 years down the road, that track is just going to be in such bad shape, nobody's going to use it except the joggers and the people on their bicycles. The other problem you've got with Vote Park is that it's not fenced. And so everybody and their dog that wants to access that track thinks, I can take my bike on it, I can take my kids with their tricycles, and so you've soon got ruts on it and other damage. You talked about rainfall. We don't get a lot here, I guess, but you certainly get the ruts. So as you say, Councillor, you're not going to get the meets here. You're not going to get the provincial championships. You're not going to be able to vie for it, as Kamloops has done by putting in good facilities and attracting all these different provincial competitions, where they call themselves the what's the name? They tournament capital of BC, and that's why. Is because they put in all these ball fields, they put in tracks and so on. So with respect, Mr. Mayor, I urge you, perhaps don't make a decision tonight. Do some more investigation in that. And by the way, Mr. Trang, I'm just wondering, does the rebuild include new runways and surfaces for the field events? Because that's also a big part of it. But I do urge you to look into it a little bit further before. I mean, I can appreciate the comment that it can be improved in the future, but I think what you're doing is you're going to spend $500,000 on something that's not going to be a good surface for the athletes that are serious about track and field. And by the way, Merritt's got a history of some fantastic athletes that have come out of here. Hurdler by the name of Croker, high jumper by the name of John Beers, you know the Beers family. He was one of the best in the country. In fact, he was ranked in the world. And I don't know where they had their facilities in those days because I wasn't here, but anyway, I just wanted to add my 2 bits worth. I've probably spoken too long.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. So
as just to add a little more detail, as a also a track and field athlete. I'm not allowed to make those decisions, color my personal judgment, but council is, certainly, as the will of the people. What we have been instructed is that there wasn't 1.3, whatever it was, 1.3 something million dollars in $1.346 million in city coffers in order to do that upgrade. And so we worked very, very hard to find that 500 that would bridge the gap to have a surface added in the future under a grant. But the rest of it, there's no, excuse me, there's no particular grant identified right now. And the discussion with city finance was that that money was not in reserve available for spending. So at this point, the resolution would have to be to defer all work or to, I'm not sure what finance would say, actually.
So just to comment on Peter, the fact that this is a public park, you're not going to see any fences. This is a public park. So it's going to be used by the public, has been traditionally used by the public since I moved here in '77. So we won't be fencing it off. So that's just not going to happen. So I think we have to get realistic on the situation of what we can afford, what we can't afford, or just turn it back to what it was and leave it alone. That's about our options right now. So we don't have the money. We can see that construction has already started. And I can see the new track laid out there as well. So I think what we have to do here is either think a little harder on this and defer, or just go with what it was and leave it alone. So that's where I'm at. I'm not going to go to option 3 because we simply can't afford it. So I'm not about to go there myself. Council can do whatever they like to do. Do we have $1 million hanging around that we can just use? I'll get you to hit your mic there. Again, Kevin?
If council would like to instruct me to look into any and all options further, including with our grant staff, council's free to do so. I don't have the answer at this time.
Okay. So maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should defer this to finance and see what we can come up with. But I also think we have to look at a situation of how fragile this track is going to be without it being fenced in, because it is a public park and it's going to get used. So I don't want to spend $1 million only to have another $500,000 every other year to fix the polymer track as it gets deteriorated. So I think this is something we have to take into consideration. So, Councilor Richard.
Well, I agree with that statement that we don't have the money right now. I also agree with the comments that was heard from the public and also from Councillor Charney, because when you have a proper track that you can use for these events, you could attract other meets and events that could end up here. Maybe people wanting to train because there's not enough space to have a running group in Kamloops or something, or maybe alternate groups want to come here and use our space and have a user, maybe not. But by the time we actually do any work and get any bills, could this be a budget item for next year possibly as one of our capital projects with, like, maybe? I mean, that's why I'm wondering if we should look at the funding, because if we're already going to be spending 500,000 plus the 440, if it's not all that much more, maybe it's something we could do, but it's not one of Rick's projects for next year maybe, but maybe it could be. I don't know.
I don't want to leave the park sitting in the condition that it's in for another year.
I don't either.
So we have to be realistic on this.
Yep. Thanks.
Councillor Egan.
I was just going to, thank you, I was just going to reiterate that as well. I mean, there's already been a pile of money spent on what we're doing over there, and I mean, I don't even want to guess how much that is, because construction is expensive, and I think we need to defer it, but I also think we know what the answer is going to be.
Councillor Charney.
I think, I know it will not be fenced. There are many high school tracks and public tracks that are not fenced in, but they are synthetic surfaces. They will not be damaged. But as Peter said, a cinder track, as soon as when it rains, if the kids are on their bicycles, etc., we have vehicles driving across that. So you take in spring breakup, when the ground is soft, if a truck goes over that cinder track or bicycles are on it, you've got your ruts. And so you have to have a special machine to get those ruts out. And so I'm just beating the bush, but I think that we should let Kevin see if he can find some money, and if we're going to do it right. Because having a track in town will get the elementary kids interested in a track. We're then going to maybe have some athletes starting to use this track and develop a track program here. So I think if we're going to do it, we do it right from the get-go. So that's my opinion.
Councilor Petrosi?
Yeah, Kamloops has done the heavy lifting. They're the tournament capital, and we're only 45 minutes down the road. So I think we should be piggybacking off them, and I think we should go with the polymer too, or try to find the money for it.
Just seeing where this discussion is going, if I may, I just want to lay out this project so that everyone's clear how it is getting done right now. So there's effectively 3 work scopes that is happening. So the original work scope is taking the old material out of there. The second, and restoring some of the surfaces from the flood. The second work scope is to make it a proper oval and 8 lanes wide. So that's option number 2 on there is the second work scope. The third work scope can be optioned, and that would be overlaying a polymer track. And so the savings would be, there would be some savings from hauling in cinder and then replacing with polymer. Honestly, that number's not large. I don't have it with me, but it was under $100,000 of actual material that's going on to this out of that entire $1.1 million price tag. So the actual material is quite small. There is certainly the ability to make that change or to direct through a resolution to bring forward, so to approve option 1, to approve option 2, and then to bring forward a resolution to look for money for option 3. So I just wanted to highlight how that work scope is going. If we let it sit, then option 1 will basically just lie because it's DFA money, and so option 1 is just to make it back the way it was before. If we want to get something better, we'd have to vote for option 2, which is 8 lanes wide and some kind of surface, and then a resolution to look for money to make that surface polymer. I don't have the ability to do that, but that's how, if that was desired, that's how that would have to be phrased.
So we have the option to go with option 2 as we consider whether we move to option 3. So it wouldn't stop the work that's happening there right now. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
But we could still amend the option 2 to option 3 if we magically find $1.3 million for this thing.
True. Yeah. And so that could be in the same resolution for sure, is to direct to look for sources of an additional $1.3 million and bring back the potential sources for that to council. And then council would just be voting on whether to option that additional 1.3 through a grant or borrowing or whatever finance is able to come back with.
So with the way the work is going, when do you think we would have to actually have a set in stone surfacing decision?
I would have to go talk with the team and the project managers on this team, but it would be a fairly quick decision for sure within the next couple of weeks. So that would be an answer I can get to council tomorrow.
Okay, so here we sit. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, but is KLL on site right now?
That's correct.
Okay, so you think they would wait 2 weeks or they'll go to another job?
They've got scope. So right now they've got scope that they're doing under the original restoration, which isn't a cost to the city itself. Tonight's meeting is to authorize the additional scope and the rounding and releveling, et cetera. There's some sprinkler installations that they're doing and things like that. So the over and above, that I think will take them about a week and a half to 2 weeks to do all of that stuff. We'd have to move fairly quick, but honestly, they're not doing the polymer anyway. They're subcontracting it. So that wouldn't require them to demob, et cetera. It would just require an appendix to the contract if we wanted to run it through them or going directly to a polymer track paver. It gets a little, the reason that those get bundled typically is because of the pass off of the project. So KLL does the base construction and then that gets passed off to somebody who's doing polymer. If you put that all in the same contract, then KLL is responsible for handing off that surface. If they're different contracts, then it's the city that's responsible for doing the QC quality control work to make sure that that track prep is done and ready for the polymer. So we can certainly run that either way, but it would have to be a decision that we probably have to make in the next week or so here. So
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So my question, Councillor Charney mentioned with a cinder track, if a vehicle gets on it, leaves ruts, and a machine has to be brought in. So we have a polymer track, same thing happens. How expensive is this to fix a polymer track?
That's not information I have in front of me.
We're going to need to have that information because, but polymer is polymer. So you get enough on there. So I think I'm going to make the motion as it sits with a look to move to option 3 if money can be found and a little bit more information, because we're in this thing now and people are expecting this to be done. So I would move option 2 as it sits right now so the work can continue with Kevin looking to try and find some money. But I don't want to see the process stop, and we have I mean, the people that live around there are already fighting the dust situation. It's unfair to ask them now to sit another year like that. So we've got pipes all over the place, we've got machinery on there. So Mr. Lawes, am I phrasing this correctly or am I incorrectly here?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think what the motion that you would like to move, if there's a seconder on council, is that council approve the award of a contract to KLL Construction for 993,450 to complete the repair and improvements outlined below to Vote Park Track, and that the city's finance department be instructed to research and come back with possible funding sources to upgrade to a polymer track as a matter of urgency.
That's what I said. Councillor Etchart.
I heard it. You got a very British accent all the
I
time.
know. I'm like Stewie from Family Guy. Councillor Etchart, I need a seconder. Councillor Petrosi. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. No, he's time delayed. I've already been over this 3 times. Okay, he does oppose. Sorry. Okay, thank you. No problem. Thank you. Can I get you to turn the mic off there, please? Yes, sir. Moving on to 8.5. Seems like a million years. Bid for Silga Convention 2025. Mr. Lawes, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a fantastic opportunity to put the City of Merritt on the extremely exciting map of Southern Interior Local Government Association convention locations. And if you're a total nerd, then that's very exciting. Merritt's a member of Silga, and every year you attend the Silga convention. And last week we were contacted by Silga to ask if the City of Merritt was interested in bidding to host the annual convention in 2025. And as a staff level, our immediate response was that, of course, we would need to take this to council to get your feedback, input, possible either veto or full-throated support or anywhere in between. But that our initial thought, I brought in a couple of other staff members on the call. I was able to grab people in the corridor, and we started talking about the possibilities in Merritt. Essentially, it would be bringing around 300 delegates from various local governments across the Southern Interior to see Merritt, to experience us as a community, to host the entire Silga Association here with all the normal resolutions, training, networking, and opportunities to see various things around the city. There's all those opportunities. So if council are interested in doing this, then a resolution from you would be appropriate to advance this further. This is not a case that we've been told if you want it, you can have it. This is just a request to bid. So if you, essentially, if you pass this resolution, then staff would research potential activities and write to the Silga board expressing interest in hosting, and then the board would consider our bid versus any others that came in for the 2025 year. When it comes to activities, that's talking about things like, say, tours of local businesses, in our case, tours of, say, flood recovery projects, showing how the city's rebuilding after the flooding events. It would be essentially showcasing Merritt in the immediate vicinity of the Nicola Valley, and we think it would be a good, small but good economic boost to the area, having these people in, say, using our hotels, learning what Merritt can offer. But it is entirely up to you if this is something that you want to spend staff time on and researching and looking into.
Thank you. So just from my We put a Silga on here, I think, in 2016?
2011.
2011. And it was really enjoyable. It was a bit of work, but it was really worth the time. So I would be more than happy to throw our name in the hat because every counselor gets a little bit of a job to do, and we get to shine a little bit. And I think it would be good. So I'm all for it. Counselor, let's see who wins here. Counselor Egan.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you, Your Honor. Your Worship.
Whatever.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, in 2011, I actually won one of the jobs to cater some of the events. So it was really well received, and I had a blast catering it, and I saw everybody that was here really enjoyed it. So I'm in if we do this.
Councilor Richard?
Also in, what's the harm in throwing our name in the hat? I mean, why not? We might get it, we might not.
You could always come and run on our polymer track. Councilor Charney?
I'm in.
There we go.
Your Worship, Councillor Olgane's hand was up.
Yes, Councilor Olgan?
So there are some requirements regarding the capacity for the Civic Center as well as hotel capacity. I checked the hotel capacity. We do meet that requirement. So I just would like to confirm the capacity for the Civic Center to make sure that we meet that requirement.
We do.
Yep. So on that one, they did note that the convention is now larger than it was when it last came to Merritt, which is simultaneously a good thing if that means more delegates, more spending power, more learning, etc. But it does also create the potential challenge of, say, do we have the capacity? When we pulled up the floor plan of the Civic Center and City Hall, and we expressed this verbally over the phone, talking about measurements, capacity, events that we have hosted, etc., they expressed a belief that our facilities would be adequate.
So if we are successful in hosting this convention in 2025, what could be the staff time that is required to be able to pull this off?
It definitely wouldn't be nothing. We don't have a firm number of hours, say, that would need to be put into it. We have been assured that the Silga executive now do the vast majority of the heavy work, that they have their own teams who come in to do things like, say, lighting, sound, etc. That said, yeah, there would be a staff input. We believe that this would be significantly compensated for by the benefits to the city.
So, Councillor Hogan, when it was put on, it was. Council did not have to be part of it. There was a couple councillors that chose not to be part of the Silga deal. My job, I was given a job to bring in arrange accommodations for the two speakers and bring the speakers in through a different group. That was my job. To pick up the speakers, feed the speakers, get them there, and then get them back to their planes. That was my job. We also had another, Councillor Baker handled all of the cars that were to haul people around. So every councillor gets a certain job, but only if they choose to be part of it. They don't have to throw their hat into the ring. It is fairly time consuming as you get closer, but it's you'll find that most people that you approach when you're putting on Silga are more than happy to jump in and be part of it. But there is some work to be done by council. I would have to say you're probably going to put in about a good 45, 50 hours over 2 weeks getting this ready to go, because it is a pretty big deal. How Silga is, they're expecting things to happen. So every councillor will have a job, and there will be some staff time. So it is intensive. It's not just like here it is, it's over. We have to put our hat into the ring, and we have to do our part. Each one of us will get a job to do. It's just the way it is. But the Silga executive is very good at working with you. They keep you on a timeline, and they make sure that you're hitting your goals. And Ellison is very professional at this. She's been doing it for a bazillion years. So they make sure you're a success. So we do get a lot of help that way. But there is a time commitment. No, there's no kidding, there is. Councillor Charney?
Well, I would definitely volunteer for finding portable ashtrays with cigarettes.
That's not all you're going to volunteer for. Nice one. There's a story behind that one. So, any other questions? That council instructs staff to research potential activities and write to the Silga board expressing interest in hosting the 2025 Silga Convention. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Petrosi, any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Good. Thank you. 8.6, Council Policy Review Committee recommendations from June 21st, 2023 to be introduced by Ms. Brick. Ms. Brick, please. Can I get you to shut your mic off there, Colin? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on June 21st, the Policy Review Committee, they met and they reviewed several policies. 3 of them they asked to bring forward to council because they felt they were in a position to bring those ones forward. The 3 of them were the community grant and aid, outdoor water use, and the employee recognition policies. The community grant and aid, there was a recommendation to amend the policy to remove the $50,000 budget or amount that was set out in the policy and to bring this back into the annual budget process. There was also a request to not remove the individual limits, but they didn't need to be listed in the policy. They are listed in the grant application forms, and to amend the grant application form so that it actually asks the applicants how much money they have fundraised for their event in that year. So that form is is attached here as well for your information, and it does include that line in there now. The employee recognition form, or the employee recognition policy, it was renamed the employee long service recognition policy, in line with the celebration of achieving career milestones. The amendments to the policy include a separation of procedures from the policy. That's one of the things that the overall program is looking at doing, is updating all of the policies as well as just pulling out the procedures, putting them into procedures and having policy in the policies. So that's what we have done to make the changes in that policy. And the committee also reviewed the financial allocations for the commemorative gifts and determined that they were set at the appropriate level, so there's no changes to those. The third policy that was considered to be brought forward here is the outdoor water use. The outdoor water use policy, it was amended to update the days of the week for even-numbered houses to provide a more equitable time between waterings. One thing that was found in the policy was between odd and even-numbered houses, there weren't the same numbers of days between waterings. So when even-numbered only had 2 days between waterings, whereas odd had 3 days between their waterings. So that's been changed. There is a disconnect now, or we would like, yes, we would like to disconnect the requirement to set the water enforcement levels at, right now they're set at provincial levels. The City of Merritt, our levels are not always the exact same as the greater region. So the slight change in here would allow the city to set our drought levels. We would still use the provincial drought levels as a guide, but not have it hinge. So as those go up and down, we're able to adjust ours as meet the needs of the actual city. We would still continue to do this in consultation with the province and the Nicola Watershed Management, as we always have, but we'd be able to set them at the levels that meet the needs of the city.
Mr. Lawes.
Thank you, Worship. Just to add to that point, because I know Patrick Farmer, of course, was talking about this earlier tonight. There's a couple of specific issues around having the water levels specifically pegged to the provincial, regional levels as we currently do, because until about, I think, 2 years ago, that wasn't the case, and then we pegged it to because frankly, at city staff level, we are not water management experts, and we thought it would be a good idea to lock ourselves into the provincial levels, which is rigorously set, examining the local areas. The issues that we found with it are twofold, that oftentimes the drought portal does not begin actually getting updated until after it has started getting dry in Merritt, which means we will potentially want to begin watering restrictions earlier than the actual portal starts getting updated, which is difficult when we say that we're locked into the provincial levels. And also simultaneously, sometimes the official water, say if you're in a relatively dry fall, then you can retain the provincial levels will still say that it is a drought level 3, drought level 4, despite the fact that there is, by that point, enough rain and enough water that watering can be justified. So as Ms. Brooks said, we would always keep it under very close review and very closely informed by the provincial levels. We're simply proposing the disconnection so that we can have some extra flexibility if it appears necessary for Merritt's needs to either go lesser or more stringent water restrictions.
Okay, thank you.
There is one additional change that wasn't contemplated during the policy review committee, and that was that it might be beneficial to incorporate stratas in a similar manner as mobile homes. Some strata units, such as townhouses, they're all odd or all even at this point, whereas mobile home parks, it goes by the number of the units. So all the even numbered units would water on even days, all the odd numbered units would water on odd numbered days. There's a proposal from a member of the community to do this as well for strata units, so that townhouses, etc., would be able to water in that same manner.
So that would be an amendment?
That would be a slight amendment to the wording in the policy.
So we have the three in front of us. I'll read the recommendations and then we'll talk about them. So first recommendation is that council adopt the amended City of Merritt Policy Community Grant and Aid as attached to this report. Councillor Richard, Councillor Egan, any questions on that, the grant and aid? We're all fairly happy with the way it looks. I think it covers what we're looking for. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second recommendation, that council adopt the amended City of Merritt Policy Employee Long Service Recognition Program as attached to this report. Councillor Egan? Councillor Charney? Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed?
Oh.
Yeah, we just want to make sure. Was that an opposition, Councillor Hogan, or you were just late? Thank you. Yeah, let's do that. Third, that council adopt the amended City of Merritt Policy Outdoor Water Use as attached to this report as amended. I need someone to move that. Councillor Egan. I'll second it. Oh, go, Councillor Hogan. Thank you. This is the motion on the amendment. As amended. As amended. As amended. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? There we go. Good one. So we're good on that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Resolution, can I get you to shut your mic off there, Ms. Brick? Thank you very much. Resolution regarding banking to be introduced by Mr. Netkanemi. You are.
Your Worship, Royal Bank of Canada requires a motion that establishes the authorized persons to conduct business with the bank. We are updating the resolution regarding banking to include Ms. Brick as Acting Director of Corporate Services.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of, well, I'll just read it first. First recommendation is that council amends the signing authorities for the City of Merritt to the current elected officials, mayor and council, and appointed officials, municipal employees as identified in the check signing policy. Councillor Richard, Councillor Petrosi, who looks at me, he gets it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second recommendation that council moves to appoint the listed elected officials and the appointed officials to be authorized to sign the Royal Bank of Canada banking documents on behalf of the City of Merritt. Councillor Richard again. Councillor Egan is looking right at me. I feel the, and then Councillor Hogan as well. Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, 8.8. Municipal Finance Authority of BC Schedule of Authorized Signers, introduced by Mr. Nakimi again. You're a popular man tonight.
So your worship, this is something that we've already filled out and would like council's approval to update our officers with the Municipal Finance Authority. It's something important that we need to have done before we put in any applications such as the wildland fire truck that we discussed this evening.
Okay. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Laus, we just read these two recommendations, did we not? Because I see no so 8.8, it's been introduced, but I don't see any recommendations. Did we just not read those a minute ago? Because I'm looking at 8.8, it's exactly the same recommendations. I'll get you to push your button. There we go.
So basically just looking for council approval to update this formally
Okay.
with the Municipal Finance Authority.
It's just I got the big old paper here, so you're looking for the nod, are you?
Yes.
So, council, everybody good with it? Councilor Olgan, you're okay with it? We're good to go. Yeah, we're good to go. Thank you. 8.9 cold water flood mitigation UBCM CEPF grant funding to be introduced by Mr. Strang. You're back.
And
You're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another one of those that I wrote a while ago here. So we continue to work very, very hard to find funding for the entire $115 million cold water renewal plan, which involves a significant amount of earthwork and acquisitions and movement and et cetera, until we get some big money. One of the smaller things that we're doing is applying for smaller grants. So UBCM disaster, DRR, disaster, I actually don't remember what it stands for, disaster something resiliency. Anyway, UBCM has a grant stream, $2 million. It opens, or has been opening a couple of times a year. We actually connected on this particular stream last year, and that's what we have an active construction project right now, protecting our public works facility and wastewater treatment plants. That project is actually active right now. We did receive that grant. So that was a good win for us. This is the exact same grant, except for a different identified section. The section that was identified, so we applied for this grant as it's part of the flood mitigation plan that was approved by council. UBCM has come back to us and said, we'd like to see a council resolution for this specific grant rather than for, hey, go find funding for this whole flood mitigation plan. Fair enough. So what this particular dike section is, we are constrained at the current time to building dike sections on parcels of land that we as a city own, because we don't have a mechanism to purchase nor money to purchase private property or allowances or anything on private property right now. That coincided with the fact that we have a very, not very large, but fairly large tender out right now for reconstructing the Claybanks RV park and reinstalling some things in there. So it seemed like a good idea all around to put up some diking and some earthworks and some fill to protect the work that we're putting in there. So that was what we submitted as the DRR grant. Was a, I don't remember how many meters it is, but it basically protects and surrounds the Claybanks Park right by the bridge there. The second stream of this is much smaller. It's $150,000, and that is for some flood risk work. So basically what that is, in much simpler terms than what the grant says, is a bit of work to determine where in town it's going to be. Like, if we get a flood bulletin that says 120 cubic meters is coming down the Coldwater River, what does that mean? We understand what that means in volume of water. What does that mean in terms of depth at different parts of the town? And what does that mean in terms of where the inundation corridors are? So we already have a whole bunch of great hydrological engineering for what level the river is going to be, where kind of the inundation zones are, turning that into more of a risk plan of dump 8 dump truck loads right here. And, you know, that corridor is kind of blocked off. So that's the work we're envisioning for this other grant, for this $150,000. So what we're looking for is the official council resolution to say, yes, apply for this UBCM grant. There is no, on this particular grant stream, there is no municipal contribution. So it is 100% covered under the grant. The only municipal part would be if the project runs over budget, then the municipality would be required to cover whatever the project is over budget. Both of these have a fairly healthy 30% contingency in them, so I don't foresee that being a problem.
Thank you. So we have 3 recommendations. I'll read them off. First recommendation is that Council ratify staff's application to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Disaster Risk Reduction, CEPF DRR, grant funding stream that will fund 100% of the cost of the Coldwater River flood mitigation, City of Merritt, Vote Street Bridge across Claybanks RV Park, and 100% of the cost for flood risk assessment and emergency preparedness study for the Coldwater River. I need a move. Councillor Egan, Councillor Charney, 100% of funding sounds good to me. So any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? No opposition. Second recommendation, that staff be directed to report back to Council with the decision of the grantor, including funding, approved and updated budgets, projections, plans, timelines, and costs, including any portion of the costs that we require the city taxpayers to fund before proceeding with any work. Councillor Petrosi nods. Councillor Egan puts her hand up. Who's seconded? Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Third recommendation, that Council direct staff to oversee project management and the management of funding that is awarded for this project. Councillor Richard, Councillor Charney. Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Strang. Appreciate
Thank
it. 8.10, and I'll handle this one. The City of Merritt appoints a director of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District as my alternate, and to replace me if I cannot attend. Councillor Claire Newman, unfortunately, passed away, but she was my appointed alternate director from the City of Merritt. With her passing, the position must be filled. My recommendation is that Adam Etchart be appointed as the alternate director for the Thompson-Nicola Regional District from the City of Merritt. Councillor Charney, Councillor Egan. Any questions on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Done. Oh, except for you. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Notices of motion or emotion? No? Reports from council. I'm going to keep mine short. I've been super busy, and I'm still this thing with Councillor Newman. I attended a lot of things, Airport Appreciation Day and a couple of other things, but it's been a long meeting, so I'm not going to drag it out. So I've attended a lot of stuff. I'm good. Yes, you got to push that button. Councillor Egan.
I've attended quite a few things as well, and it has been a very, very busy summer already, especially with the passing of Councillor Newman. But I wanted to say that I did go to Ian Ward's service on Sunday, and it was very, very well done, very moving. He's got such a supportive family, loving family. I was very happy to attend. And that's, we're going to miss him. He did a great job around town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Olgan, anything from you? No. Okay. Moving on. Information items. We have items from Nickel Valley Pro Rodeo, Little Britches Rodeo, Bailey House, Minister Kang. I would like to bring one of these forward, if I may. The Rodeo Association. We are getting close to game time, and I would like to sponsor, if we could. I would like to propose that we support at a platinum level, which is $5,000. The city has traditionally always been part of this and continues to be part of it, so it's coming to game time, and I'm sure the Rodeo Association would appreciate us getting on with it. I don't want to delay this any longer. Mr. Nyami, do we have the ability to go with that funding?
Your Worship, we do have $25,000 available in council contingency that you can instruct us to use for this purpose.
Okay, so I would like to propose that we do the platinum level, 5,000. Questions? Councillor Richard.
So last year, I think we either did the gold or silver, where we were still the sponsor up on the sheet. But I mean, are there going to be other things with the other pieces? Rodeo is really important in Merritt. I'm just wondering if we normally do 2,000 or 3,000 or, well, I mean, we're halfway through the year, I guess.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end of the year, so.
Just a thought, just to be cautious.
Not a problem.
Since things get
Appreciate it.
typically talked about.
Councillor Charney.
Is this every year that they ask for this?
Yep.
Okay, so we already gave them 7,500, and
That was grant and aid.
grant and aid, and so now we're going to give them 5,000.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean,
Just clarifying my math here.
well, to be 100% honest with you, this is, Merritt is built on the idea of the rodeo and a lot of other things, and this is something traditionally that brings a lot of people here. The 5,000 that we put in is going to come back tenfold, and we know that. So, and I think it behooves the city to be a major player in this. And so that, I mean, again, that's where my situation is. Councillor Hogan, anything from you? I can't really see if you got your hand up or anything, so I'm guessing.
No, I am in favor of any type of sponsorship. So if based on what Councillor HR said, so I would like to match the type of sponsorship that we presented last year.
So I'm not sure what we had last year. So, Councillor Etcher?
Last year, by this time, we had spent more money, so I think we only had about 2,500 left, and so we went with the silver, from what I remember. And we had some most of us all went from council, and it was a great entertainment weekend, and I think we all supported. I think we just didn't have anything left beyond silver to do last year, from what I can remember.
Thank you. So the motion is for 5,000 to the pro rodeo. Oh, Councillor Egan. Well, you're reaching for your button. You don't actually have to light up for that. So all those in favor? Opposed? Oh, sorry.
Just before we vote, can I just clarify the resolution just to confirm that we've got all the wording that we need?
Sure.
Okay. So the resolution, as I understand it, is that the City of Merritt support Nicola Valley Pro Rodeo at a platinum level from council, and with funds being drawn from council contingency.
Yes, sorry, I didn't clarify that. Yes, that's exactly the motion. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Any questions on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Good to go. Anything else from any of the information items that anyone would like to address? And there was one from the Housing Accelerator Fund grant proposal. Mr. Pranesh is here in case anybody had any questions on that. You might get away. You might get away. I'm fairly familiar with it, so I have no questions. I'm good with it. I just don't know if anybody else has any questions. Would you like an overview? Since Mr. Pranesh has sat here through the whole meeting. Come on up, Mr. Pranesh. We'll just get a quick overview because you've been sitting here all night, so we need to hear your melodic tones. So there you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, the objective of this information item is to inform Mayor and Council about the Housing Accelerator Fund grant proposal. As you may see from the report, that the City of Merritt is eligible for this grant proposal because of its population is under 10,000, and city staff, including myself, is working to apply for this grant proposal with the Department of Finance. So approved participants can use this incentive funds in variety of investments, and there are key deliverables required for this grant. One of those is an action plan, and then we have to come up with 5 initiatives. Include like those 5 initiatives should be included in the action plan. So in the discussion section, we have proposed 6 initiatives that could be part of that action plan. And since this application portal is open for the grant proposals since June 5, and we are actively working towards it. The deadline for this application is August 18. So if council is interested to have more information, council may require an additional meeting for the information session, and we would be more than happy to provide you further information. But yeah, we are actively working towards this grant proposal and aiming to achieve, aiming to gain this grant for the community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jan? Go ahead, Councilor Richard.
If we were to be successful with the grant application, could we use this for the affordable housing on the piece of land that we had gotten on Kootley and Garcia, that parcel there?
I'm not too sure at this point of time, but
because if we could use it for affordable housing, maybe we could work that into a plan to develop something on that corner lot, possibly.
Yeah, thank you for your question, but I have to double check. I think, as per my understanding, the grants can be used for the proposed 6 initiatives. So, but I can double check and get that information to you.
And that probably would be in tandem with the ROC because I think Mr. Strang is going to be looking after that as well.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Jan? Boy, you sat here for 2 hours just for that. Oh, there we go.
Sorry. Sure. How much are these grants? What do they go up to?
I have a summary of that document. Let's quickly look at it.
And the type of housing, are they low income, condominiums, townhouses?
Yeah, I'm not too sure at this moment. I haven't looked through in the numbers, but yeah, we can provide more further clarification regarding that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Jen.
Thank you, Roship. Thank you.
Just one thing, the Bailey House information. In the past, we've actually had them come and present this. I would prefer that they do that in the future in case we have some questions to ask them, because that's traditionally the way we've done it in the past. So I would like a representative, considering we fund the whole thing. So, yeah, thank you. Oh, Councilor Egan, you got your mic on?
Sorry.
See, you lit up apparently. Mr. Lois?
If you are done with the agenda for the night, Your Worship, then with my apologies, because this was something that should probably have come up earlier, but it's been a somewhat fast-moving afternoon, and this would require unanimous approval as a late item, but I would appreciate it if we could possibly go into closed session for just a few minutes under Section 91A, which is personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality. And I can tell you that would relate to the position that I'm currently filling and would like to fill properly.
Okay. So we will then adjourn to closed meeting, and that will be as you suggest.
That would need a unanimous vote, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the motion that Mr. Laus has put forward, closed meeting. Opposed? Good to go. So we'll move into closed meeting. Clear the remote. Thank you very much. Everybody take a 5-minute break.